The kindest thing you can do today may not be forgiving them. It may not be understanding them. It may not be proving that you are strong, graceful, healed, wise, or above the pain. The kindest thing you can do today may be this. Stop treating yourself like someone who deserved what happened. Pause. Because many women do not only carry heartbreak, they carry a private courtroom inside their chest. Every morning, before the day has even asked anything from them, they stand before themselves accused. Why did I stay so long? Why did I believe the words? Why did I ignore the silence? Why did I keep giving chances to someone who kept giving me confusion? Why did I love someone who could receive my tenderness, my patience, my loyalty, my body, my prayers, my time, my forgiveness, and still not truly choose me? And the pain becomes heavier because she is not only grieving what someone did, she is grieving who she became while trying to survive it. Stay with this, because before this message is over, I want you to understand something you may have needed for a long time. You are not weak because you are still affected. You are not foolish because you hoped. And you are not less worthy because someone handled your love without reverence. There is something important you need to hear before you blame yourself one more time. The wound was not simple, so the healing will not be simple either. Soft pose. Maybe you woke up today and did what grown women often do. You got up before your feelings were ready. You answered messages. You made coffee. You checked on children, parents, work, bills, appointments, laundry, responsibilities. You smiled at someone who had no idea your heart still felt like a room after a storm. You moved through the day carrying a grief nobody could see. And somewhere between the ordinary task, the memory came back. A word, a song, a time of day, the empty space beside you, the phone lighting up, but not with their name. Or worse, the phone staying quiet while your mind became loud. And you told yourself, I should be over this by now. But listen closely. That sentence may sound like strength, but sometimes it is cruelty wearing discipline. There is a difference between encouraging yourself forward and punishing yourself for still bleeding. And many women have been taught to heal like they were taught to love. Quietly, quickly, politely, without inconveniencing anyone. But your pain is not an inconvenience. It is information. It is your inner life telling the truth about what your outer life had to keep tolerating. Sometimes the deepest exhaustion comes from pretending you are fine while your soul is still trying to understand why someone could come close enough to know you and still leave you feeling unseen. Pause. The kindest thing you can do today is to stop arguing with your own injury. Stop saying it was not that bad when your body still tightens at the thought of being ignored. Stop saying, I should have known better, when you were making decisions with the information, hope, attachment, fear, and love you had at the time. Stop calling yourself dramatic for reacting to inconsistency. A steady heart can become anxious when it is placed inside an unstable love. A trusting woman can become suspicious when truth keeps arriving late. A calm woman can become restless when silence is used like a locked door. And a loyal woman can lose herself trying to keep warmth in a place where someone else has already emotionally left. This is where the wound becomes confusing, because betrayal does not only break trust in another person, it can make you distrust yourself. You begin to question your judgment, your intuition, your memory. your beauty, your value, your ability to choose, your ability to recognize love. You may look back and wonder, how did I not see it? But sometimes you did see it. You just did not yet have the strength, safety, support, or clarity to accept what seeing it would require. That is not stupidity. That is a nervous system trying to survive a truth the heart was not ready to hold. Let this breathe. Ask yourself gently, were you truly blind? Or were you hoping that love would become what it promised to be? Because there is a grief that comes when someone leaves. And there is another grief that comes when someone stays close enough to keep your hope alive, but distant enough to starve your heart. That kind of love can make a woman feel ashamed of her own longing. She may miss someone who hurt her. She may crave a message from someone who abandoned her emotionally. She may reread old conversations, not because she wants to suffer, but because she is searching for evidence that the love was real. She is trying to find the beginning again, the tenderness, the promises, the version of them that made her open, the version of herself that believed. And when she cannot find enough proof to quiet the ache, she may turn against herself. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I asked for too much. Maybe I should have been softer. Maybe I should have waited longer. Maybe I should have loved better. But here is the part many women are never told. When someone refuses to be accountable, the loving person often becomes the place where all the blame goes. Because blame needs somewhere to land. And if they will not carry their part, your heart may try to carry all of it just to make sense of the story. But carrying all the blame does not make the story clearer. It only makes you smaller. The kindest thing you can do today is to give the burden back to reality. Not with rage, not with revenge, not with a speech you may never get to deliver, but with a quiet inner sentence. I can acknowledge my part without accepting responsibility for someone else's emotional absence. That sentence may not make you feel powerful at first. It may make you cry, because self-respect often begins as grief before it becomes strength. It can hurt to admit that you were setting a table for a love that had stopped arriving long ago. It can hurt to realize you were holding a key to a house someone had already emptied. It can hurt to understand that loyalty alone cannot revive a relationship where only one person is still protecting the sacredness of the bond. And yet, this is not the end of you. This is the beginning of no longer abandoning yourself in order to keep someone else's illusion alive. Pause. Today, treating yourself kindly may look very ordinary. It may look like eating something warm instead of surviving on coffee and memory. It may look like putting the phone in another room because checking for their name has become a form of self-wounding. It may look like not rereading the message that always pulls you back into confusion. It may look like letting yourself cry without turning the tears into evidence against your progress. It may look like saying, I miss them, and then adding, but missing them does not mean I must return to what harmed me. That is a deeper kind of honesty, because healing does not ask you to lie. It does not ask you to pretend you do not remember. It does not ask you to become cold. It asks you to stop letting longing overrule reality. There's dignity in no longer begging confusion to become clarity. There is mercy in no longer forcing your heart to understand someone who benefited from your uncertainty. And there is quiet power in telling yourself the truth without using that truth as a weapon against your own tenderness. You were not wrong for loving deeply. You were not wrong for wanting consistency. You were not wrong for believing that a grown love should come with honesty, presence, care, and emotional responsibility. The pain was not that you expected too much. The pain was that you kept lowering the cost of access to you until someone could have your devotion without giving you safety. Soft pause. So today, before you make another excuse for them, make room for yourself. Before you analyze their childhood, their fears, their wounds, their pressure, their timing, their confusion, ask what happened to you while you were busy understanding them. Who held you while you were holding the relationship together? Who comforted you after you swallowed another disappointment? Who protected the woman in you who kept saying, something about this hurts, even when love kept asking her to be patient? The kindest thing you can do today is not to become hard. It is to become honest. Honest enough to admit you were hurt. Honest enough to admit you stayed. Honest enough to admit you still feel attached. Honest enough to admit that attachment is not the same as love, and familiarity is not the same as safety. And honest enough to begin treating yourself like someone whose pain deserves care, not criticism. Because the woman you are becoming cannot be built on self-punishment. She needs truth. She needs rest. She needs boundaries that do not apologize for existing. She needs a gentleness strong enough to say, no more, without turning bitter. And most of all, she needs you to stop standing beside the person who wounded her and start standing beside the woman who survived. This is where the return begins. Not loudly, not perfectly, not all at once, but in one small act of mercy toward yourself. One refusal to call your pain weakness. One moment where you stop reaching backward for someone who left you emotionally hungry and begin reaching inward for the woman who has been waiting for you to come home. There's a particular kind of tiredness that comes after you have spent too long being emotionally underfed. It is not ordinary sadness. It is not the simple ache of missing someone. It is the exhaustion of having your heart live on crumbs while your soul kept trying to call it a meal. Pals, maybe there were days when they were tender enough to make you stay. A message that sounded like the old them. A look that softened your anger. A small apology that did not repair much, but touched the part of you that still wanted to believe. A few peaceful hours after weeks of confusion, and suddenly, your whole body relaxed. You thought, there it is. Maybe we are coming back. Maybe they still care. Maybe I was wrong to doubt. But then the distance returned. The coldness came back. The silence stretched itself across the room again. And once more, you were left trying to understand how someone could make you feel wanted one day and invisible the next. This is why your healing has felt so difficult. Not because you lacked wisdom, not because you loved too much in some foolish, childish way, but because inconsistency trains the heart to wait. It gives you just enough warmth to keep you remembering, and just enough absence to keep you anxious. That kind of love does not simply break your heart. It teaches your nervous system to live on alert. You begin listening for changes in tone. You notice how long they take to reply. You study their face, their pauses, their mood, their distance. You become fluent in small signs because the relationship has stopped giving you clear truth. And slowly, without meaning to, you begin to organize your peace around another person's availability. Soft pause. But here is a deeper truth. When peace depends on someone unpredictable, your body begins to confuse relief with love. When they finally respond, you feel calm. When they finally act affectionate, you feel chosen. When they finally explain themselves, even poorly, you feel grateful. Not because the relationship is healthy, but because the anxiety briefly stops. And when pain keeps stopping and starting, the heart can mistake the ending of distress for the arrival of love. That is not weakness. That is how emotional starvation works. A hungry heart will sometimes bless a crumb because it has forgotten what a full table feels like. So if you are ashamed because you kept going back to someone who hurt you, pause before you condemn yourself. Ask with tenderness, was I returning to love, or was I returning to the brief relief of not being abandoned again? That question may ache, but it can also open a door, because when you understand what you are attached to, you can begin to loosen the bond without insulting yourself. You do not have to say, I was stupid. You can say, I was in pain and I was trying to find safety in the same place that kept taking it away. That is not an excuse. It is clarity. And clarity is often the first act of kindness a woman offers herself after years of confusion. Pause. Maybe nobody saw what it cost you. Maybe they saw you dressed well, speaking calmly, handling your responsibilities, going to work, caring for children, answering family, paying bills, showing up for everyone else. Maybe they thought, she is strong, and you were. But strength does not mean you were untouched. Strength does not mean you did not sit in your car a little longer before walking into the house. Strength does not mean you did not stare at the ceiling at night, replaying a conversation from 3 months ago, trying to find the exact moment when the warmth changed. Strength does not mean you did not refresh your phone, then pretend you were not waiting. Strength does not mean you did not miss them and hate yourself for missing them. There are women who function beautifully while privately falling apart. They pack lunches with a broken heart. They attend meetings with swollen eyes. They smile at neighbors while carrying unanswered questions in their chests. They fold laundry while grieving a future they never got to live. They sit beside family, nodding at ordinary conversation, while some private part of them is still standing in the ruins of a promise. So no, you are not too emotional because this changed you. You are human, and some experiences reach deeper than the mind. They touch identity. They touch trust. They touch the old places where you once wondered whether love would stay. Soft pause. This is why being unchosen hurts so deeply. It is not only the loss of one person. It can feel like evidence. Evidence that you were not enough. Evidence that your tenderness was not valuable. Evidence that your years, your sacrifices, your patience, your prayers, your forgiveness, your waiting, your body, your softness, your labor, your loyalty somehow failed to make you worth choosing. But that conclusion is not truth. It is pain trying to explain itself. Someone's inability to choose you with maturity is not a measurement of your worth. It is a revelation of their capacity, and capacity matters. A person can enjoy your love and still not have the character to honor it. A person can desire your presence and still not be willing to protect your heart. A person can come close to you and still be incapable of building something honest. A person can miss you and still not be safe for you. That last truth can be hard to accept because many women confuse being desired with being valued. But there is a difference. Desire may reach for you. Value protects you. Desire may miss your warmth. Value respects your womb. Desire may return when lonely. Value remains when life is difficult. Desire may enjoy what you give. Value understands what it costs you to keep giving. And this is where your dignity begins to rise again. Not when you stop feeling, but when you stop using their inability as a mirror. Pause. You may have been looking at yourself through the eyes of someone who did not know how to see you clearly. And perhaps today, the kindest thing you can do is take your own reflection back. Take it back from the person who made you feel replaceable. Take it back from the silence that made you feel foolish. Take it back from the half apologies that left you doing all the emotional cleaning. Take it back from the relationship where you kept shrinking your needs so the connection would not feel threatened. Take it back from every moment you wondered if you were asking too much simply because someone kept giving too little. Love should not require you to become smaller just to remain in the room. Let that settle. Love should not require you to become smaller just to remain in the room. If your honesty was treated like pressure, if your needs were treated like drama, if your tears were treated like inconvenience, if your questions were treated like attacks, then perhaps the problem was never that you were too much. Perhaps the problem was that the relationship only had room for the version of you that stayed quiet. And a quiet woman is not always a peaceful woman. Sometimes she is a woman who has learned that speaking costs her more than suffering. But that is not love. That is emotional containment. That is being allowed to stay only if you do not disturb the comfort of the person who is hurting you. And you were not born to become a silent witness to your own disappearance. Soft pause. So today, treating yourself kindly may mean allowing your truth to be simple, not dramatic, not exaggerated, not explained in a way that would satisfy a courtroom. Simply, it hurt me when they disappeared. It confused me when their affection kept changing. It damaged my trust when their words and actions did not live in the same house. It exhausted me to keep hoping for consistency from someone who only offered moments. I am allowed to name what happened without making myself the villain. There is mercy in simple truth, because when you finally name the wound accurately, you stop trying to heal the wrong injury. You cannot heal abandonment by calling it impatience. You cannot heal betrayal by calling it misunderstanding. You cannot heal emotional neglect by calling it independence. You cannot heal a broken nervous system by telling yourself to just be positive. And you cannot rebuild dignity while still protecting the version of the story that keeps you ashamed. Maybe they were not a monster. Maybe there were good days. Maybe there were moments that were real. Maybe you still remember their softness, their laughter, their hands, their familiar voice. Maybe this is what makes the grief so complicated. Because your heart does not only remember the damage, it remembers the tenderness too. And that tenderness can become a rope pulling you backward. But listen closely. A few beautiful moments cannot be asked to carry the weight of an unsafe pattern. A memory is not a covenant. A good day is not a healed relationship. An apology is not change unless it becomes behavior. An affection is not safety unless it comes with consistency, respect, and truth. Pause. This is where grown women often suffer in silence because they are mature enough to understand complexity. They can say they were hurting too. They can say they had their own wounds. They can say they did not know how to love. They can see the humanity of the person who hurt them, and that is beautiful. But compassion without boundaries can become a second wound. You can understand someone and still decide they no longer get access to your most vulnerable places. You can forgive in your own time and still not reopen the door. You can wish them healing and still stop volunteering your heart as the place where their brokenness gets to live. You can be tender and still be done. That is not bitterness. That is maturity. That is the soul learning that mercy must include you too. Ask yourself gently, why does your compassion so easily travel toward the person who wounded you, but struggle to return home to you? Why do you understand their silence, their fear, their confusion, their avoidance, but judge your own tears as weakness? Why do you make room for their humanity while denying your own? The kindest thing you can do today is to stop excluding yourself from your own mercy. You are allowed to be a woman who loved deeply and still needs protection. You are allowed to be a woman who understands their pain and still refuses to be harmed by it again. You are allowed to be a woman who misses them and still chooses not to reopen the wound. You are allowed to say, my heart is tender, but it is no longer available for careless hands. Soft pause. There is a moment in healing when you begin to notice how much of your life has been organized around not feeling the full truth. You stayed busy. You helped everyone else. You kept explaining. You kept hoping. You kept making the pain look smaller so you could keep living beside it. But the truth kept waiting, patiently, quietly, like a letter unopened on the table. And when you finally open it, it may not say what you hoped. It may not say, they loved you the way you deserved. It may not say, they will understand one day. It may not say, the apology is coming. It may not say, your loyalty will be rewarded by their awakening. It may simply say, you were hurt. You were lonely. You kept trying. And now you are allowed to come back to yourself. That may not sound like enough at first, because part of you may still want justice to come in the form of their realization. You may want them to understand what they broke. You may want them to feel the absence of you. You may want them to finally say the words they avoided when it mattered. And that longing is human. But do not build your healing on the hope that the person who minimized your pain will one day become the witness your soul needed. Sometimes closure begins when you stop asking the wrong person to validate the wound. Sometimes peace begins when you stop waiting for the one who confused you to become the one who explains it. Sometimes your freedom begins with a quiet, painful sentence. They may never fully understand what they did, but I can stop abandoning myself while waiting for them to understand. Pause. Today, be kind to the woman who did not know how to leave. Be kind to the woman who stayed because she thought patience could save love. Be kind to the woman who forgave because she remembered what it felt like when things were good. Be kind to the woman who kept checking her phone because a part of her was still hoping not to be forgotten. Be kind to the woman who wanted closure from someone who kept benefiting from her confusion. Be kind to the woman who kept loving through disappointment because she did not want the years to mean nothing. She does not need your contempt. She needs your arms. She needs you to stop looking back at her with the wisdom you only gained after the pain and asking why she did not have it sooner. She was surviving. She was hoping. She was trying to make a home out of something that sometimes felt warm and sometimes left her standing outside in the cold. And now you know more. Not because you are superior to who you were, but because the truth has cost you enough to become clear. So let kindness begin there, not as a soft excuse, but as a holy refusal to keep punishing a woman who has already suffered, because the next part of your life cannot be built by hating the version of you who carried you through the last one. She deserves respect too. She got you here. Bruised? Yes. Tired? Yes. Changed? Yes. But here, And here is enough place to begin again, not with a loud announcement, not with a perfect plan, but with one small decision not to betray yourself today. One meal, one boundary, one unanswered message left unanswered, one honest sentence in your journal, one walk without your phone, one moment where you place your hand on your chest and say, I am not my abandonment. I am not my betrayal. I am not the way someone failed to love me. And maybe you will not believe it fully yet. That is all right. Let the words sit beside you until your spirit is ready to receive them. Healing does not always arrive like a sunrise. Sometimes it begins like a woman finally closing a door quietly, not because she has stopped loving, but because she has started listening to herself. And in the next part, we need to speak about the hardest kindness of all. The kindness of no longer negotiating with reality just because longing still has a voice. There comes a moment when the heart has to stop negotiating with reality. Not because the love disappeared, not because the memories stopped speaking, not because the longing became quiet, but because a woman finally begins to understand that longing is not always a guide. Sometimes longing is simply pain reaching for what is familiar, pausa, and that may be one of the hardest truths to accept because you may still miss them. You may still think of them when the day slows down. You may still wonder what they are doing, whether they think of you, whether they regret it, whether they know how deeply they changed you. You may still have moments when the old tenderness rises up inside you before your wisdom can stop it. And then the shame comes. Why do I still care? Why do I still miss someone who hurt me? Why does part of me still want to hear from them? Why does my heart keep turning toward the very place that wounded it? But be gentle here. Missing someone is not the same as wanting the wound back. Missing someone does not mean you have forgotten what happened. Missing someone does not mean you are weak, confused, or failing. Sometimes you miss the person. Sometimes you miss the version of them you first met. Sometimes you miss who you were when you still believed. Sometimes you miss the future your heart had already started decorating. Sometimes you miss the feeling of having somewhere to place all that love. And sometimes, if you are very honest, you may not miss them as much as you miss the relief of not having to accept that they were never going to become who you needed them to be. Soft pause. That is a deep grief, because reality can feel colder than hope. Hope lets you keep rewriting the ending. Reality asks you to stand still and see what was actually there. Hope says, maybe one day they will understand. Reality asks, what have they consistently shown you? Hope says, maybe they were just afraid. Reality asks, did their fear keep hurting you while you kept making room for it? Hope says, maybe if I explain it one more time. Reality asks, how many times must your heart testify before you stop putting it on trial? Pause it. There is dignity in letting reality speak louder than longing. But dignity does not always feel peaceful at first. Sometimes dignity feels like nausea. Sometimes it feels like shaking hands. Sometimes it feels like crying after you do not reply. Sometimes it feels like an empty evening where you do not know what to do with the silence they used to occupy. Sometimes dignity feels like grief because the part of you that kept hoping still has to be laid down with tenderness. This is why treating yourself kindly can not only mean soft words. Sometimes kindness is structure. Sometimes kindness is protection. Sometimes kindness is refusing to keep placing your nervous system inside the same storm and calling it love. Because a woman can become addicted to the cycle of being hurt, waiting, receiving a little affection, relaxing, and then being hurt again. Not because she is foolish, but because intermittent affection creates a powerful bond. The heart starts chasing the return of warmth. The body starts waiting for relief. The mind starts building explanations to survive the inconsistency, and the soul starts bargaining. Maybe if I am quieter, maybe if I am more understanding, maybe if I stop asking, maybe if I do not bring it up, maybe if I love them through this, maybe if I become easier to keep. But ask yourself this gently. What did it cost you to become easy for someone who was making love difficult? Did you lose your voice? Did you lose your appetite? Did you lose your sleep? Did you lose the ability to trust your own feelings? Did you start apologizing for needing what any steady love should have offered freely? Pausa. Sometimes what you called patience was really self-abandonment, wearing a soft voice. That sentence may hurt, but it does not come to shame you. It comes to bring you back. Because patience is beautiful when it is mutual, honest, and rooted in love. But patience becomes dangerous when it asks one person to keep bleeding quietly while the other person keeps avoiding growth. Patience is not supposed to be a place where your needs go to die. Understanding is not supposed to become a prison. Forgiveness is not supposed to mean giving someone endless access to the parts of you they keep mishandling. And loyalty is not supposed to require your disappearance. You can be loving without being available for confusion. You can be gentle without being endlessly accessible. You can be forgiving without pretending the pattern did not injure you. You can be spiritually mature without volunteering yourself for repeated emotional neglect. You are allowed to protect the woman you are becoming, even from someone you once loved deeply, even from someone who had good moments, even from someone who knows your history, even from someone who may still have a piece of your heart. Soft pause. There is a kind of self-kindness that feels almost unfamiliar at first, because you may have spent years being kind to everyone except yourself. You gave explanations. You gave patience. You gave second chances. You gave benefit of the doubt. You gave soft landings to people whose actions landed hard on your heart. You became skilled at seeing the wounded child in them, the pressure on them, the fear in them, the confusion in them. And perhaps that compassion is real, but now it must become whole, because compassion that never includes you becomes another form of abandonment. You cannot keep offering grace outward while starving inward. You cannot keep calling yourself mature for carrying pain quietly. You cannot keep being the safe place for someone who made your inner life unsafe. There is a difference between love and emotional starvation. Love nourishes. Starvation makes you grateful for crumbs. Love steadies. Starvation makes you beg silence to explain itself. Love protects your softness. Starvation makes you hard on yourself for needing care. Love invites your truth. Starvation teaches you to edit your pain so it will not upset the person who caused it. And maybe today, the kindest thing you can do is admit which one you were living in. Not to humiliate yourself. Not to rewrite every memory as false. Not to deny that there were moments of beauty, but to stop letting a few moments of beauty excuse a pattern of emptiness. Vows. A relationship can have real tenderness and still not be safe. A person can have love for you and still not know how to love you well. A chapter can contain beautiful memories and still need to end. A woman can honor what she felt without returning to what diminished her. That is maturity. That is grief with clear eyes. That is the beginning of inner authority. Maybe you once thought healing would mean never thinking of them again, but perhaps healing begins more quietly than that. Perhaps healing is when you think of them and no longer turn the memory into a command. You remember, but you do not reach. You ache, but you do not abandon yourself. You miss them, but you do not rewrite the pattern. You feel the pull, but you do not mistake the pull for truth. That is not coldness. That is consciousness. That is a woman learning to separate the voice of longing from the voice of wisdom. And wisdom often speaks softer. Longing rushes. Wisdom waits. Longing says, maybe this time. Wisdom says, what did last time teach me? Longing says, I miss them. Wisdom says, I miss myself too. Pause. Let that breathe. I miss myself too. Because underneath many heartbreaks is not only the pain of losing someone else. It is the ache of realizing how far you traveled away from yourself. You may have stopped doing things that made you feel alive. You may have stopped dressing for your own joy. You may have stopped laughing from your belly. You may have stopped trusting your instincts. You may have stopped sharing your needs because you were tired of seeing them handled carelessly. You may have stopped planning your future because too much of your hope was tied to whether they would finally show up. You may have become a woman waiting at the window of someone else's uncertainty. And now your soul is asking you to return. Not dramatically, not perfectly, not with a declaration that impresses anyone, but in the ordinary sacred work of tending to yourself again. Drink water, eat with care, sleep without punishing yourself through midnight memories. Move your body, not to become more desirable, but to remind yourself that you still live here. Clean one small corner of your room. Open a window. Let the light touch the places grief has made heavy. Say no without writing an essay. Say yes to something that does not require you to betray yourself. Let one trusted person know the truth, not the polished version. Let yourself be held by a life that is bigger than the relationship that hurt you. Then, soft pause. This may sound simple, but do not confuse simple with shallow. Sometimes a soul returns through small things because the wound was too deep for grand gestures. A woman who has spent years emotionally bracing may need to learn safety in little pieces. A quiet morning, a calm meal, a boundary kept, a phone left unchecked, a prayer without begging, a day where she does not insult herself for still being tender, a night where she lets herself sleep instead of reopening the wound just to feel close to the person who caused it. That is how dignity is rebuilt, not through slogans, through repeated acts of self-respect, through decisions no one may clap for, through private refusals, through choosing not to go back into a conversation that always leaves you doubting your own reality, through noticing the urge to explain yourself again and gently saying, no, my truth does not need to audition for belief. Pause it. There may be days when you feel strong, and there may be days when one memory opens like a door and you are back inside the grief. Do not call that failure. Healing is not a straight hallway. It is often a house with rooms you thought you had already cleaned. You may enter one room and find anger there, another room and find sorrow, Another room and find embarrassment. Another room and find love still sitting quietly in the corner. Do not panic. You are not going backward just because you discovered another room. You are becoming honest enough to walk through the whole house of your experience without abandoning yourself in any part of it. That is deep healing, not pretending the house never burned, not living forever in the ashes, but learning where the damage happened, gathering what still belongs to you, and leaving behind what was never yours to carry. The shame was never yours to carry. The entire blame was never yours to carry. Their avoidance was never yours to carry. Their inability to choose with integrity was never yours to carry. Their silence was never yours to translate into your unworthiness. You may have carried it because you wanted the love to make sense, but today you can begin putting it down, one piece at a time. Soft pause. Maybe the kindest thing you can do today is stop demanding that your heart heal on a schedule your pain did not create. You may have lost more than a person. You may have lost years. You may have lost trust in your own perception. You may have lost the future you had already imagined. You may have lost the innocence of believing words without watching actions. You may have lost the comfort of not knowing how deeply someone could disappoint you. So no, you do not need to rush, but you do need to be honest. Because there is a difference between giving yourself time and giving the wound permission to keep choosing for you. Time alone does not heal what truth has not touched. Distance alone does not heal what the body still fears. Silence alone does not heal what the heart still turns into hope. You need gentleness, yes, but you also need clarity. You need rest, yes, but you also need boundaries. You need compassion, yes, but you also need to stop returning your tenderness to careless hands. This is the balance. Balm with backbone. Softness with sight, mercy with a door that can close. Pause. And perhaps this is the quiet emotional shock of today. You do not have to stop loving them in order to stop losing yourself. You do not have to hate them to protect your peace. You do not have to erase the memories to honor the damage. You do not have to become hard to become free. You only have to begin telling the truth more loyally than you tell the fantasy. That is where your power returns. Not in revenge, not in performance, not in proving you are unbothered, but in the private, sacred decision to stop making your soul live inside someone else's inconsistency. So tonight, when the mind begins its old work, when it tries to replay, explain, defend, regret, and bargain, place one hand over your heart and speak gently to the woman inside you. Tell her, I know you wanted it to be different. I know you stayed because you believed love could grow there. I know you are tired. I know you miss what felt real. But today, I will not punish you for being human. Today, I will not make you earn kindness. Today, I will treat you like someone I am responsible for protecting. That is not a small thing. That is a turning. That is a woman no longer waiting outside the door of someone who kept leaving her cold. That is a woman walking back toward the warmth of her own life. And in the next part, we need to speak about self-blame. Why it clings so tightly after betrayal. Why it feels almost safer than truth. And how to begin releasing yourself without denying what happened. Self-blame can feel strangely safer than truth. Because if you can make everything your fault, then some part of you can still believe you had control. Pausa. If it was because you loved too hard, then maybe next time you can love less. If it was because you asked too much, then maybe next time you can need less. If it was because you missed the signs, then maybe next time you can watch more carefully. If it was because you stayed too long, then maybe next time you can leave faster. Self-blame gives the illusion of power. It tells you, if I can find the exact mistake I made, maybe I can make sure this pain never reaches me again. And that is why so many women hold on to guilt even after betrayal. Not because guilt is true, but because guilt can feel more manageable than accepting that someone had the freedom to hurt them, disappoint them, deceive them, neglect them, abandon them, confuse them, and refuse accountability. That truth can feel unbearable because it means your love did not protect you from someone else's immaturity. Your patience did not guarantee their honesty. Your forgiveness did not make them responsible. Your loyalty did not make them loyal. Your softness did not make them gentle, and your worth did not force them to recognize what they had. That is a hard truth. But it is not a truth meant to destroy you. It is a truth meant to release you. Soft pause. Maybe you have been carrying a sentence that begins with if only. If only I had spoken differently. If only I had waited. If only I had left sooner. If only I had been calmer. If only I had been prettier, easier, more patient, more exciting, less emotional, less honest, less tired, less wounded, less myself. But ask gently, how much of you would have needed to disappear before they finally treated you with care? And if disappearing was the requirement, was that really love? There is a difference between healthy self-reflection and self-erasure. Healthy reflection asks, what can I learn? Self-erasure asks, how can I become someone who would not have been hurt? Healthy reflection keeps your dignity intact. Self-erasure makes your entire humanity feel like a mistake. Healthy reflection helps you grow. Self-erasure keeps you attached to the belief that if you had been different enough, someone else would have become better. But another person's refusal to show up with honesty cannot be solved by your disappearance. You cannot become small enough to make an unavailable person emotionally present. You cannot become silent enough to make a careless person safe. You cannot become perfect enough to make someone value what they were willing to neglect. Pause. This is where kindness must become precise, not vague, not sentimental. But it's easy. You may need to say, yes, I stayed longer than I wish I had. And yes, I ignored some signs because I was afraid of what they meant. Yes, I gave too many chances. Yes, I confused potential with commitment. Yes, I hoped the good moments were the truth and the painful pattern was the exception. But none of that means I deserve betrayal. None of that means I deserve neglect. None of that means I caused someone else's emotional dishonesty. None of that means my love had no value. That is mature healing. It does not deny your part, but it does not turn your part into the whole story. A grown woman can take responsibility without accepting blame for what was never hers. She can say, I see where I abandoned myself without saying I deserve to be abandoned. She can say, I need stronger boundaries without saying my lack of boundaries caused their lack of integrity. She can say, I will learn from this without saying I was the reason it happened. This is how dignity returns, piece by piece, truth by truth, not by pretending you were flawless, but by refusing to make your imperfections the explanation for someone else's cruelty, cowardice, or neglect. Soft pause. Maybe you are ashamed because you kept explaining your pain to someone who kept acting like they did not understand. You tried different words, softer words, shorter words, careful words, words that did not sound accusing, words that made room for their feelings, words that carried your hurt gently so they would not feel attacked by the weight of it. And still, somehow, the conversation turned back on you. You became too sensitive, too demanding, too suspicious, too emotional, too hard to please, too stuck in the past, too unwilling to move forward. And over time, you began to wonder if maybe they were right. Maybe your pain was the problem. But let this settle deeply. When someone benefits from your silence, they may call your honesty drama. When someone is comfortable with your overgiving, they may call your boundaries selfish. When someone does not want to face the harm they caused, they may call your memory bitterness. But remembering what hurt you is not bitterness. Naming a pattern is not drama. Wanting consistency is not pressure. Needing emotional safety is not weakness. And asking for care from someone who claimed to love you is not asking too much. Pause. There is a difference between a woman who cannot let go of the past and a woman whose pain was never properly acknowledged. Unacknowledged pain does not simply vanish. It circles. It asks again. It knocks on the same door. It returns at night. It shows up in the body. It tightens the chest. It interrupts sleep. It makes the mind replay old conversations because the heart is still searching for a place where the story became honest. Silence creates loops because the mind does not like unfinished danger. When someone disappears emotionally, refuses clarity, avoids accountability, or offers affection without explanation, your nervous system may keep trying to solve the mystery. Not because you are obsessed, because uncertainty is exhausting. A clear goodbye hurts, but confusion keeps reopening the wound. An honest ending can be grieved, but an unclear ending becomes a hallway with no door. You keep walking. You keep turning corners. You keep hoping one more thought will lead to peace. And that is why today's kindness may be to stop asking your mind to solve what only truth could have resolved. You may never receive the full explanation. You may never hear the apology that touches the actual wound. You may never get the conversation where they finally understand the emotional cost of what they did. And that absence can hurt, but it does not mean healing is impossible. It means healing may have to begin without their cooperation. Soft pause. There is a painful maturity in accepting that some people will leave you with questions because answering them would require a level of honesty they are not willing to enter. And when that happens, closure cannot depend on their courage. It has to come from your own. Your courage to say, I may not know every reason, but I know how it felt. I may not have every answer, but I know what it cost me. I may not get their confession, but I no longer need to deny my wound in order to keep loving the memory. That is a powerful turning, because so much of your suffering may have come from trying to make your pain acceptable to the person who caused it. You wanted them to validate it, to say, yes, I see it now, to say, yes, I should not have treated you that way, to say, yes, you were not crazy, to say yes. Your heart had a reason to hurt, and perhaps one day they may, but your healing cannot remain hostage to that day. You cannot leave your dignity waiting at the door of someone else's awakening. Pause. Maybe the reason self-blame clings so tightly is because it keeps you connected. As long as you keep asking what you could have done differently, you are still in conversation with the relationship, still reviewing the evidence, still standing in the old room, still trying to rewrite the moment, still trying to rescue the woman you were by giving her a different script. But the past cannot be rescued by punishment. The past can only be honored by learning. And the woman you were does not need you to keep dragging her through the same memory as if more suffering will change the ending. She needs you to turn toward her and say, I understand now. I see what you were carrying. I see why you stayed. I see what you hoped for. I see how tired you were. I will not shame you for not knowing then what pain forced me to learn later. That is kindness with depth. That is how you stop becoming your own accuser. Because if someone else abandoned your emotional reality, you must be careful not to continue the abandonment inside yourself. If they dismissed your pain, you must not dismiss it too. If they made you feel hard to love, you must not keep treating yourself as if you are difficult to care for. If they made you question your worth, you must not build a home inside that question. Soft pause. One of the most tender things a woman can do after betrayal is believe her own experience again. Not exaggerate it, not dramatize it, not use it as a weapon, but believe it. Believe that the sleepless nights meant something. Believe that the tightness in your chest was telling you something. Believe that the sadness after every conversation was information. Believe that the way you kept shrinking was not peace. Believe that the confusion was not a sign of deep love, but a sign of deep inconsistency. Believe that your body noticed what your hope kept trying to soften. Sometimes the body tells the truth before the heart is ready to agree. The stomach drops, the shoulders tense, the breath becomes shallow, the sleep becomes broken, the joy becomes harder to reach. The woman who once felt warm begins to feel watchful, and still she may call it love because the heart is trying to protect the dream. But your body was not betraying you. It was trying to bring you back. Pause. So today, treat yourself like a woman whose body has been through something. Not only her feelings, her body, her nervous system, her sleep, her appetite, her energy, her ability to relax, her ability to trust a quiet moment. When you have lived inside uncertainty, peace can feel unfamiliar at first. You may feel restless when nobody is disappointing you. You may feel suspicious when things are calm. You may feel the urge to check, fix, explain, anticipate, brace. That does not mean you are broken. It means your inner life learned to prepare for impact. And now it needs patience while it learns safety again. Do not shame yourself for needing time. Do not call yourself damaged because your body remembers what your mind wants to move past. Do not demand immediate peace from a heart that had to live too long in emotional weather. Today, kindness may mean lowering the volume of your self-criticism. It may mean saying, my system is tired. My heart is healing. My mind is looping because it wants safety. My sadness is not failure. My anger is not ugliness. My tenderness is not weakness. My need for consistency was never shameful. Those sentences may feel strange at first. especially if you have spent years speaking to yourself in the voice of people who did not know how to love you well. But keep practicing. A woman must be careful whose voice she allows to become her inner narrator. If the person who hurt you has become the voice inside your head telling you that you were too much, too needy, too emotional, too difficult, too late, too foolish, then healing will require you to change the speaker. Pause. Let your inner voice become firm, but kind. Clear, but not cruel. Honest, but not punishing. Let it say, you made mistakes, but you are not a mistake. You stayed too long, but you are not stupid. You love deeply, but you are not empty. You were hurt, but you are not ruined. You were not chosen by someone, but you are not unworthy of being chosen. There is a difference between being rejected and being reduced. Someone may reject access to your life, but they do not have the authority to reduce your value. Someone may fail to honor your love, but they do not have the authority to define what your love was worth. Someone may walk away carelessly, but they do not get to decide what remains of you. You remain. And maybe that feels small today, but remaining is not small. Remaining after betrayal is a quiet form of courage. Continuing to breathe after emotional abandonment is courage. Showing up for life while grieving privately is courage. Choosing not to become bitter after being mishandled is courage. Choosing to become clear instead of cold is courage. Choosing to treat yourself kindly when shame is asking for control is courage. Pause. And perhaps this is the truth you need to carry into tonight. You are allowed to release yourself from a punishment no one ever officially sentenced you to. You do not have to keep paying for loving someone who was unable to honor it. You do not have to keep proving that you are sorry for being fooled, hopeful, loyal, patient, attached, human. You do not have to spend the rest of your healing apologizing to yourself for not leaving sooner. The woman who stayed was not your enemy. She was the part of you still believing love could become safe. She may have been afraid. She may have been tired. She may have been conditioned to endure. She may have confused sacrifice with devotion. She may have thought leaving meant the years were wasted. She may have thought one more conversation could change everything. But she was not your enemy. She was you, doing the best she could with a heart that had not yet learned how expensive self-abandonment can be. So do not hate her. Take her hand. Bring her forward. Let her rest. Tell her she does not have to keep explaining why she loved. Tell her she does not have to keep proving she was hurt. Tell her she does not have to stand trial anymore. Because today, the kindest thing you can do is stop treating your past self like evidence against your present healing. She is not evidence. She is a witness. She witnessed the confusion. She witnessed the silence. She witnessed the nights you cried quietly. She witnessed the hope that would not die. She witnessed the moment you realized you were loyal to something that was no longer loyal to you. And now she is witnessing something else. A woman beginning to choose truth without cruelty. A woman beginning to build boundaries without bitterness. A woman beginning to understand that self-kindness is not weakness. It is repair. And in the next part, we need to speak about the body, the exhaustion, the anxiety, the obsessive thoughts, the heaviness, the numbness, and why healing your nervous system may be one of the most loving things you can do for yourself now. There is a kind of heartbreak that does not stay in the heart. It moves into the body. Pause. It sits behind the eyes. It tightens the throat. It presses on the chest. It changes the appetite. It follows you into bed and wakes you before morning. It makes ordinary silence feel threatening because your body has learned that silence can mean abandonment, distance, punishment, or another truth being withheld. And this is why you must be careful with the way you speak to yourself now. Because you may be calling yourself emotional when you are actually exhausted. You may be calling yourself weak when your nervous system has been living too long without safety. You may be calling yourself dramatic when your body is simply responding to the confusion it was forced to carry. A woman can survive a relationship and still have her body living as if the danger is not over. She may be away from the person now. She may have stopped calling. She may have stopped explaining. She may have told herself, I am done. And still, her body may not yet believe she is safe. That does not mean she is failing. It means the body often needs time to catch up with the decision the mind has already made. Soft pause. Maybe you know this. Maybe your mind understands that the relationship was hurting you. Maybe you can list the reasons. The disappearing, the inconsistency, the apologies without change, the affection that came and went, the way you had to ask for care, that should have been natural. The way your needs were turned into problems. The way you kept leaving conversations feeling smaller than when you entered them. Your mind knows. But then night comes. The house becomes quiet. The phone is near. A memory rises. And suddenly, you feel the pull again. You want to check. You want to know. You want to send one message. You want to ask one question. You want to hear their voice. Not because it would fix everything, but because for a moment, it might quiet the storm inside you. This is the part many women are ashamed to admit. They know better, but their body still reaches. They understand the pattern, but their nervous system still craves the familiar relief. They remember the damage, but the ache still asks for the person who once offered comfort and confusion in the same hands. Pause. Let this be said with tenderness. You are not broken because your body misses what your wisdom knows was not safe. You are healing from a bond that trained you to confuse contact with calm. If someone repeatedly caused anxiety and then occasionally relieved it, your body may have learned to seek relief from the same person who created the distress. That can feel humiliating, but it is not proof that you are foolish. It is proof that your heart and body were caught inside a painful rhythm. Pain, waiting, hope, relief, disappointment, explanation, tenderness, silence, pain again. After enough cycles, the body begins to anticipate the next drop. It braces before the message comes. It aches when the message does not come. It relaxes too quickly when affection returns. And then, when the relationship ends or distance grows, your body may still search for the old pattern because the pattern became familiar, even when it was not peaceful. This is why kindness now must be physical, not only emotional. You cannot scold a nervous system into peace. You cannot shame a body into feeling safe. You cannot insult yourself into healing. You must become a gentle guardian over your own inner weather. Soft pause. Ask yourself quietly, what does my body need from me today that I kept asking another person to provide? Does it need rest? Does it need food? Does it need warmth? Does it need a walk? Does it need to stop staring at a screen that keeps reopening the wound? Does it need music that does not take it back to the past? Does it need to sit in the morning light and remember that life is still here? Does it need one honest breath without pretending? Sometimes the kindest thing you can do today is not a grand act of transformation. Sometimes it is putting both feet on the floor and reminding yourself, I am here. I am safe in this moment. I do not have to solve my whole life tonight. That may sound simple, but to a woman who has lived in uncertainty, the present moment can feel like a foreign country. She has been living in yesterday's wound and tomorrow's fear. She has been replaying what happened and rehearsing what might happen. She has been trying to predict someone who made unpredictability feel like home. So yes, learning to return to today is sacred work. Not dramatic, not impressive, but sacred. Because today is where your power can actually touch the ground. Pause. You cannot change the night they lied. You cannot rewrite the message they never answered. You cannot force the apology to arrive. You cannot make the years return untouched. You cannot become the woman you were before the wound as if nothing ever happened. But you can care for the woman sitting here now. You can give her water. You can let her breathe. You can stop calling her damaged. You can stop making her earn rest. You can stop treating exhaustion like a character flaw. You can stop asking her to heal while still exposing her to the same things that reopen the injury. And this is important. Sometimes self-kindness means removing excess. Not because you are angry, not because you are trying to punish them, not because you are playing a game, but because your body cannot recover in the presence of constant emotional threat. If their name on your phone sends your heart racing, you may need distance. If their social media keeps pulling you into comparison, you may need to stop looking. If old messages keep becoming a place where you reopen the wound, you may need to stop reading them. If every small sign from them pulls you back into hope, you may need to protect yourself from signs. That is not weakness. That is wisdom, learning how to guard a healing place. A wound cannot close if you keep touching it to see whether it still hurts. Soft pause. There may be a part of you that says, but if I stop checking, what if I miss something? Miss what? Dear heart? Another half message? Another unclear apology? Another small warmth followed by distance? Another invitation back into the same room where your peace was always the first thing to leave? Ask yourself with honesty, am I checking because there is real evidence of change? Or because uncertainty has become a habit my body mistakes for love? That question is not easy, but it is kind. Because kindness does not always soothe the illusion. Sometimes kindness interrupts the pattern. Sometimes kindness says, I know you want to look, but we are not going back into that pain tonight. Sometimes kindness says, I know you want to explain, but the person who needed endless explanations may not have been listening with care. Sometimes kindness says, I know you miss the tenderness, but tenderness without safety kept costing us too much. Sometimes kindness says, I will not let longing make decisions for us when the body is tired. This is not you becoming cold. This is you becoming protective. There is a difference. Coldness refuses to feel. Protection feels deeply and still closes the door when the room is unsafe. Pause. Maybe you have noticed how tired you are. Not just sleepy. Tired in your bones. Tired of thinking. Tired of remembering. Tired of explaining to yourself why you still feel this way. Tired of pretending you are fine because life did not pause just because your heart broke. Bills still came. Children still needed you. Work still expected focus. Family still asked questions. The world still moved, and you had to move with it. So your grief learned to become quiet. It sat beside you in the car. It followed you into the grocery store. It came with you to work. It waited until the bathroom door closed. It waited until the house slept. It waited until no one needed anything, and then it finally asked for your attention. Do not resent yourself for the timing of your grief. Many grown women grieve in fragments because life does not give them a clean room to fall apart. They cry between responsibilities. They process pain while cooking dinner. They feel rage while folding clothes. They miss someone while answering emails. They carry heartbreak in a body that still has to keep a household, a career, a family, a face, a life. So if healing feels slow, perhaps it is not because you are unwilling. Perhaps it is because you have been healing in the margins. Pause. And a woman healing in the margins needs mercy. She needs small rituals of return, not rituals that promise instant peace, not rituals that deny the pain, but rituals that tell the body, you are no longer abandoned by me. Try this gently. When the obsessive thought comes, do not attack it. Do not say, why am I thinking about this again? Say, I see you. You are trying to protect me by reviewing the danger, but we are not in that moment now. When the urge to check the phone comes, do not shame yourself. Say, I know you want relief, but we are learning not to seek relief from the place that injured us. When the sadness rises in the chest, do not rush to silence it. Place your hand there. Breathe slowly. Say, you can be here. I will not leave you alone with this. When anger appears, do not call it ugly. Ask what it is protecting. Often, anger is the part of you that finally understands you deserved better before the rest of you is ready to believe it. And when numbness comes, do not panic. Numbness can be the body's way of resting from feelings that arrive too heavily, too often, for too long. You are not failing because every day does not feel profound. Some days, healing looks like feeling nothing and still not harming yourself with old patterns. That counts. Soft pause. There is a quiet bravery in not returning to the thing that once regulated you. There is bravery in making your own home peaceful again. There is bravery in sleeping through the night without inviting old pain back into the room. There is bravery in letting a message remain unsent. There is bravery in not chasing closure from someone who has already shown that clarity is not their gift. There is bravery in choosing breakfast over obsessing. There is bravery in choosing sunlight over scrolling. There is bravery in choosing one grounded breath over another hour of mental court. These little acts may not look dramatic to anyone else, but they are how a woman teaches her body that the war is ending, not all at once. Not perfectly, but slowly, through repetition, through tenderness, through boundaries, through the gentle discipline of not reopening what you are trying to heal. Pausa. And one day, perhaps not today, but one day, your body will begin to believe you. It will not tense at every silence. It will not interpret peace as danger. It will not reach so quickly for the person who once made confusion feel normal. It will begin to rest inside your own presence. And when that happens, you may realize something tender and powerful. You were not only trying to get over a person, you were trying to teach your body that love does not have to feel like waiting for the next injury. You were trying to teach your mind that unanswered questions do not have to become a home. You were trying to teach your soul that it can be soft without being available to harm. You were trying to teach your life that there is still morning after a season of emotional night. So be patient with the body that carried you through uncertainty. Do not mock its trembling. Do not rush its trust. Do not punish its remembering. It was there when you were trying to hold yourself together. It held the tears you swallowed. It carried the stress you had no time to name. It kept you breathing through conversations that left you hollow. It kept showing up when your heart did not know how. Now it deserves care, not criticism. Care. Pause. Tonight, before you ask yourself why you are not healed yet, ask a kinder question. What part of me is still waiting to feel safe? What part of me still believes I have to earn peace? What part of me still thinks love must be chased, monitored, decoded, or begged from silence? What part of me needs to know that I will not abandon her again just because she is taking time? Let those questions sit softly. Do not turn them into another assignment. You have had enough assignments, enough proving, enough performing strength, enough explaining your hurt to people who did not know how to hold it. Tonight, let kindness be smaller. Let it be a blanket, a glass of water, a phone turned face down, a prayer that asks for steadiness, not reunion, a breath that does not need to become anything impressive, a promise whispered inward. I will not make my body pay for what my heart survived. That is a holy promise. That is a grown woman becoming safe for herself. And in the next part, we need to speak about boundaries, not as punishment, not as bitterness, but as the quiet structure that allows your dignity to breathe again. Boundaries are often misunderstood by women who have spent their lives loving with open hands. They can feel harsh. They can feel unnatural. They can feel like a betrayal of the softness that once made you proud. Pause. Maybe you were taught that love means enduring, that a good woman understands, that a mature woman does not make everything about her feelings, that loyalty means staying available, that forgiveness means reopening the door, that if you are patient enough, gentle enough, spiritual enough, wise enough, someone will eventually realize how deeply they are hurting you and stop, but sometimes they do not stop. Sometimes they only learn how much pain you are willing to carry quietly. Sometimes your patience becomes the room where their avoidance grows comfortable. Sometimes your kindness becomes the place where your own needs disappear. And one day, you wake up emotionally exhausted, not because you did not love enough, but because your love had no fence around it. It kept giving. It kept explaining. It kept waiting. It kept forgiving. It kept making space for someone who was not making space for you. And now, the kindest thing you can do today may be to build a boundary where you used to build an excuse. Soft pause. A boundary is not a wall built from hatred. It is a door with wisdom on it. It says, access to me must honor the life inside me. It says, my tenderness is not public property. It says, my peace is not something I will keep sacrificing to prove I am loving. It says, I can care about you and still refuse to keep abandoning myself. This is important because many women fear that boundaries will make them cold. But boundaries do not kill love. They reveal whether love can respect truth. A healthy love may struggle with a boundary at first, but it will not punish you for needing one. A mature love may feel uncomfortable, but it will try to understand. A safe love does not require unlimited access to prove closeness, but an unsafe attachment often becomes angry when you stop making yourself endlessly available. It may call your boundary distance. It may call your clarity attitude. It may call your self-respect selfishness. It may say, you have changed, as though remaining wounded was your responsibility. And perhaps you have changed. Perhaps that is the mercy. Perhaps the woman who once answered every call from confusion is learning that not every knock deserves an open door. Pause it. Ask yourself gently, who benefits when you have no boundaries? Who feels most comfortable when you silence your own discomfort? Who gets to keep taking when you keep calling your exhaustion love? These questions are not meant to make you bitter. They are meant to make you awake. Because sometimes the most loving woman in the room is also the most unprotected. She knows how to comfort everyone. She knows how to explain everyone. She knows how to forgive everyone. She knows how to carry the emotional weight of the whole relationship. But she does not always know how to say, this is hurting me, and I will not keep participating in my own diminishment. That sentence can feel terrifying when you have been loved only when you were agreeable. It can feel dangerous when your honesty has been punished before. It can feel lonely when the relationship depended on you not naming what was true. But dignity cannot breathe where truth is not allowed. And a boundary is often the first clean breath after years of emotional suffocation. Soft pause. Maybe your boundary is not dramatic. Maybe it is simply not replying the same night. Maybe it is not explaining your pain for the 10th time. Maybe it is not accepting another apology that comes without changed behavior. Maybe it is not meeting someone privately when you know your heart is still too tender. Maybe it is not checking their page. Maybe it is not asking mutual friends about them. Maybe it is not letting a lonely hour make a decision that your healed self will have to recover from later. Maybe it is saying, I cannot keep having this conversation if nothing changes afterward. Maybe it is saying, I need consistency, not moments. Maybe it is saying, I hear you, but I am no longer available for a connection that leaves me anxious, confused, and small. That may sound simple, but for a woman who has spent years prioritizing someone else's comfort, simplicity can feel like rebellion. She may shake after saying it. She may cry after keeping it. She may doubt herself. She may wonder if she was too harsh. She may feel guilty for protecting herself from someone she still loves. Do not mistake that guilt for proof that the boundary is wrong. Sometimes guilt is only the withdrawal symptom of no longer betraying yourself. Pause. When you are used to overgiving, self-respect can feel unkind at first. When you are used to being available, distance can feel cruel. When you are used to explaining, silence can feel rude. When you are used to bending, standing upright can feel aggressive. But you are not doing something wrong. You are learning a new posture. You are teaching your heart that love does not require collapse. You are teaching your body that peace is allowed. You are teaching the old wounded part of you that connection is not worth the price of self-erasure. And you are teaching anyone who comes close to you that closeness must come with care. That is not bitterness. That is stewardship. You are stewarding your life, your energy, your sleep, your clarity, your future, your softness, your capacity to love again one day without turning yourself into a sacrifice. Because if you do not protect your tenderness, pain may convince you to bury it. And you were not meant to become hard just because someone else was careless. You were meant to become wise. Soft pause. There is a difference between a hard woman and a wise woman. A hard woman says, "No one will ever reach me again." A wise woman says, "Access to me will now require respect." A hard woman refuses feeling. A wise woman honors feeling, but does not let feeling rule without truth. A hard woman uses distance as punishment. A wise woman uses distance as protection. A hard woman tries to prove she does not care. A wise woman admits she cares and still chooses peace. You do not need to become hard. You need to become clear. And clarity may be quieter than anger, but it is stronger. Clarity says, "I do not need to hate you to know this is hurting me." Clarity says, "I do not need to win an argument to trust what I lived." Clarity says, "I do not need your agreement to honor my own experience." Clarity says, "I can release the fantasy without disrespecting the love I once felt." That is the kind of strength that does not need an audience. It is not loud. It is not cruel. It is not dramatic. It simply stops negotiating against the truth. Pause it. Maybe you have been waiting to feel completely ready before setting a boundary. But readiness may not come first. Sometimes the boundary comes first and readiness grows behind it. You do not wait until your heart is no longer attached to protect it. You protect it while it is still attached. You do not wait until you feel no longing to stop checking. You stop checking while longing is still loud. You do not wait until you feel fearless to say no. You say no with trembling hands. You do not wait until you no longer miss them to choose yourself. You choose yourself while missing them. That is why this is difficult. And that is why it matters. A boundary kept while you still feel the pull is not fake strength. It is real healing. It is the part of you that finally loves you more than it fears the emptiness. Soft pause. There may be people who do not understand. They may say, "Why are you still affected?" They may say, "Just block and move on." They may say, "You are too old to be hurting like this." They may say, "You should have left earlier." But not everyone understands the depth of a bond that was built on hope, history, intimacy, responsibility, shared routines, family dreams, and years of emotional labor. Not everyone understands what it means to grieve a person, a future, an identity, and a version of yourself all at once. Not everyone understands how hard it is to leave a place where you once imagined your life would bloom. So choose carefully whose voice you let near your healing. Some people will offer advice that is clean because they never had to stand in the mess. Some people will offer judgment because distance makes them feel wise. Some people will rush you because your pain makes them uncomfortable. But you need people, even if only a few, who can hold truth and tenderness at the same time. People who do not feed the fantasy, but also do not shame the wound. People who can say, "You deserve better," without making you feel foolish for once believing People who can remind you of reality when longing edits the story. People who can help you keep the boundary when loneliness begins to negotiate. Pausa. And if you do not have many people like that, begin by becoming that voice for yourself. Speak to yourself the way you needed someone to speak when you were still inside the confusion. Say, I know this is hard. I know you miss them. I know part of you wants to answer. I know silence feels like loss. But we are not going to abandon ourselves for a moment of relief. We are not going to return to a pattern that made us question our worth. We are not going to confuse access with love. We are going to protect the woman who is trying to heal. That kind of inner language matters because boundaries are not only external, they are internal too. An external boundary says, I will not answer this message tonight. An internal boundary says, I will not spend the next 5 hours building fantasies around what that message might mean. An external boundary says, I will not meet with someone who repeatedly hurts me. An internal boundary says, I will not romanticize the pain just because loneliness is visiting. An external boundary says, I will step away from this conversation. An internal boundary says, I will not let their defensiveness convince me my wound is imaginary. This is where your dignity becomes practical, not just a feeling, a practice, a rhythm, a daily way of standing beside yourself. Soft pause. Maybe today's boundary is with them. But maybe it is also with the version of you that keeps reopening the wound. The part that keeps searching for new evidence. The part that checks whether they are online. The part that rereads the old apology. The part that studies the photograph. The part that compares herself to someone else. The part that keeps asking, was I not enough? Do not attack that part. She is wounded. She is looking for certainty. She is looking for something to hold. But you can hold her without letting her lead you back into suffering. You can say, I understand why you want to look, but looking keeps hurting us. You can say, I understand why you want an answer, but this person has not been a safe keeper of our questions. You can say, I understand why you want to know if they miss us, but their missing us is not the same as their becoming healthy for us. Let that settle. Someone can miss you and still not be safe for you. Someone can regret losing access and still not be ready to love with integrity. Someone can feel lonely and still not be capable of offering consistency. Someone can come back and still bring the same pattern with a softer voice. So the question is not only, do they miss me? The question is, can their presence love me better than their absence hurts me? Pause. That question is a boundary, a sacred one, because it moves you from hunger to discernment. It stops asking, am I wanted? And begins asking, am I safe? It stops asking, will they return? And begins asking, what returns with them? It stops asking, do they care? And begins asking, can their care become consistent, honest, accountable action? It stops asking, why was I not enough? And begins asking, why did I keep accepting less than the care my soul was asking for? Not to shame yourself, to wake yourself, because there's a difference between being desired and being cherished. There is a difference between being contacted and being chosen. There is a difference between being remembered and being respected. There's a difference between being kept nearby and being loved openly. There is a difference between a person returning and a pattern changing. A boundary helps you tell the difference. Without it, longing will blur everything. A message will feel like proof. A tearful apology will feel like transformation. A familiar voice will feel like home. But not every familiar place is safe. Sometimes the heart calls something home because it has visited the wound so many times it knows the furniture. Soft pause. So be kind to yourself by no longer walking barefoot through broken glass and calling it devotion. Be kind by refusing to make your heart available to what has not become safe. Be kind by letting silence be silence instead of turning it into a puzzle. Be kind by letting no response be information. Be kind by letting inconsistency be information. Be kind by letting your body's exhaustion be information. Be kind by believing what repeated pain has been trying to tell you. And remember this, a boundary is not the end of your softness. It is the place where your softness finally gets protected. It is where your tenderness can breathe without being consumed. It is where your love stops pouring into places that do not know how to hold it. It is where the woman in you begins to trust that you will not trade her peace for someone else's temporary attention. Pause. Tonight, you do not need to become a new person. You only need to make one choice that does not betray the person you are trying to become. Maybe do not send the message. Maybe do not explain again. Maybe do not check. Maybe do not say yes when your whole body is asking for no. Maybe do not make yourself available to confusion just because loneliness is loud. Maybe simply whisper, "My heart can be tender and still have a door. My love can be real and still have a limit. My grief can be deep and still not lead me backward. My dignity can begin before my longing ends." That is enough for tonight. A small boundary kept with trembling hands is still a boundary. A quiet no is still a no. A private act of self-protection is still a return. And perhaps the woman you are becoming is not asking you to be fearless. She is only asking you to stop leaving her unguarded. In the next part, we need to speak about grief. Not only grieving the person, but grieving the years, the dream, the home you imagined, and the version of yourself who believed love would be enough. Grief after betrayal is rarely only about the person. It is about the years, the routines, the private dreams, the quiet future you had already begun building in your mind. Pause. It is about the birthday you thought they would be there for, the home you imagined feeling safe in, the mornings you thought would become softer with time, the family picture you carried in your heart, the ordinary life you were willing to protect, the version of love you believed would grow deeper if you just remained patient, faithful, understanding, and kind. And this is why it hurts so much when people tell you to just move on. They think you are only grieving someone's absence, but you are grieving an entire imagined life. You are grieving the woman who planned around promises, the woman who made emotional room, the woman who rearranged her future to include someone who never fully built a future around her. That kind of grief does not leave quickly because it is not standing at one door. It is walking through every room of your life, touching everything that was supposed to be different. Soft pause. Maybe you are not only grieving him, maybe you are grieving the woman you were before you learned how painful inconsistency can be. Maybe you are grieving the softness you had before you became watchful. Maybe you are grieving the trust you gave before it was mishandled. Maybe you are grieving the years you spent hoping things would change. Maybe You are grieving the energy you poured into explaining, forgiving, adjusting, waiting. Maybe you are grieving the body that stayed tense for too long. Maybe you are grieving the nights you lost to anxiety. Maybe you are grieving the laughter that became quieter. Maybe you are grieving the dreams you delayed because you were busy trying to save a love that kept making you feel unsafe. And maybe the hardest grief is this. You are grieving the realization that your loyalty did not protect the relationship from emptiness. That can feel humiliating. Because loyalty is sacred to a woman who loves deeply. When she chooses, she does not choose lightly. She does not simply give time. She gives attention. She gives care. She gives tenderness in the middle of her own exhaustion. She remembers details. She forgives what other people might have walked away from. She holds the emotional thread when everything else begins to loosen. So when the relationship still breaks, she may feel as if her love failed. But listen carefully. Love does not fail because another person refuses to honor it. A seed does not become worthless because someone planted it in soil that would not hold life. Your loyalty was real. Your tenderness was real. Your hope was real. Your willingness was real. But even real love cannot build a home alone. Pause. There is a difference between grieving what was real and glorifying what was harmful. You are allowed to remember the beautiful moments. You are allowed to admit there were days when you felt seen. You are allowed to miss the sound of their voice, the familiar rhythm, the private jokes, the comfort that existed before the confusion became louder than the love. You do not have to turn them into a villain in order to justify your pain. But you also do not have to turn the good moments into proof that the pattern was safe. Both truths can live in the same room. There was tenderness, and there was harm. There were memories, and there was neglect. There were moments that felt like love, and there were patterns that made you lose yourself. Maturity is being able to hold the whole truth without editing it to protect the fantasy. Soft pause. Ask yourself gently, am I missing the relationship as it truly was? Or am I missing the future I kept trying to make it become? That question may open something tender, because sometimes the heart does not cry for what happened. It cries for what never happened. The apology that never came with change, the consistency that never stayed, the home that never felt emotionally safe, the conversation that never became honest, the version of them that never fully arrived, the life you kept waiting for. And perhaps that is why the grief feels unfinished. You are not only grieving an ending, you are grieving a beginning that never properly became. Pause. Many women carry this grief quietly because it is hard to explain. How do you tell someone that you miss a life you never lived? How do you explain that you are mourning children you imagined, holidays you pictured, a kitchen you never shared, peace you kept believing would come, a version of yourself who would have felt chosen, steady, and safe? How do you explain that the pain is not only they left, but I built so much hope inside a place that could not hold it? This is why you must be kind to yourself, because grief like this can make a woman feel foolish. She may say, how could I mourn something that was never fully mine? But the heart does not only attach to what happened, it attaches to what it believed was possible. It attaches to potential, to promises, to patterns that almost became steady, to small moments that looked like evidence. to the future it quietly prepared for. And when that future collapses, the grief is real. Even if the life never arrived, even if the promise was never fulfilled, even if the person never became what they said they wanted to become, your grief is still real because your investment was real. Pause. But here is the gentle turning. You can honor the grief without letting it become your permanent address. You can weep for the years without handing the rest of your years to the womb. You can mourn the dream without continuing to live inside its ruins. You can admit that you lost something sacred without making your future pay forever for what someone else failed to protect. This is not rushing yourself. This is not minimizing the pain. This is refusing to let the same relationship take both the years you already gave and the years still waiting for you. Let that breathe. Do not let what hurt you inherit the rest of your life. Soft pause. Maybe today's kindness is giving yourself permission to grieve correctly. Not politely, not efficiently, not in a way that makes everyone comfortable. Correctly. That means you may cry over something small. A mug, a road, a place you used to go, a song you were not ready to hear, a date on the calendar, a message you found by accident, a photograph where your eyes still believed. It means you may feel anger after sadness, numbness after anger, tenderness after clarity, strength in the morning and collapse at night. It means you may miss them and still know you cannot go back. It means you may feel relief and sorrow in the same breath. That is not confusion. That is grief moving through all the places the relationship touched. Do not shame the movement. Grief is not always neat because love was not experienced neatly. It lived in your routines, your body, your hopes, your responsibilities, your identity, your spiritual life, your sense of future. So when it leaves, it does not leave one clean wound. It leaves echoes. Pause. Some mornings, the echo may sound like regret. Why did I waste so much time? But be careful with that word. Wasted. It can become another weapon. Yes. Perhaps you gave years to something that did not become what you hoped. Yes. Perhaps you stayed longer than your peace could afford. Yes. Perhaps you invested in a person who did not invest back with the same devotion. But you were not wasting love. You were giving from the depth you had. You were acting from loyalty, hope, conditioning, fear, tenderness, commitment, longing, and the belief that love should be fought for. Now you know more. Now you understand that not every relationship is saved by more sacrifice. Now you understand that love without reciprocity becomes depletion. Now you understand that patience without change becomes self-abandonment. Now you understand that a promise is not the same as a pattern. But do not use today's wisdom to humiliate yesterday's heart. Yesterday's heart carried you here. She may have carried you through fire, but she carried you. Soft pose. There is a merciful way to look back. You can say, I wish I had left sooner, but I understand why I stayed. I wish I had trusted myself earlier, but I understand why I doubted. I wish I had not given so much, but I honor the part of me that still believed love could grow. I wish I had protected myself better, but I will not hate the woman who was still learning how. This is how grief becomes wisdom instead of shame. This is how the past becomes a teacher instead of a prison. This is how a woman stops dragging her former self through the dust and begins gathering her gently into her arms. Pause. Because the woman you were inside that relationship needs your compassion. She needs to know you will not speak about her as if she were stupid. She needs to know you will not reduce her to the worst thing she tolerated. She needs to know you remember her courage, too. The courage it took to keep loving, the courage it took to hope, the courage it took to show up with tenderness even when she was exhausted, the courage it took to admit, eventually, that something was wrong. The courage it took to begin seeing the truth. The courage it took to survive the breaking of a dream. Maybe she did not leave when you now wish she had, but she endured what you may now be too wise to endure again. And that means she gave you something, a costly wisdom, a clearer eye, a deeper loyalty to yourself, a tenderness that now knows it must be guarded, a soul that can still feel but no longer wants to be consumed. Honor her. She is part of your becoming. Pausa. There is also grief for the version of yourself you thought you would be by now. This is especially tender for grown women because at 30, 40, 50, and beyond, heartbreak does not always feel like a temporary interruption. It can feel like life has taken a road you did not choose. You may look around and see other people building homes, celebrating anniversaries, holding hands in ordinary ways, moving forward with plans that seem stable, and you may feel a quiet ache, not envy exactly, something deeper, a grief that whispers, I thought I would be somewhere else by now. I thought I would be loved differently. I thought I would feel safer. I thought I would have more time. I thought I would not be starting over again. I thought my loyalty would have become a home. That grief deserves tenderness, not shame. Because starting over at a grown age is not only emotional, it is practical. It touches finance, children, family expectations, fertility, community, housing, self-image, energy, trust. The question of whether you will ever have the strength to open again. So when you feel tired, understand why. You are not just releasing a person. You are reorganizing a life. And a life does not reorganize in one afternoon. Soft pause. But listen to this carefully. Starting over does not mean starting from nothing. You are starting with wisdom. You are starting with evidence. You are starting with a deeper knowledge of what your peace costs. You are starting with a body that has told you what anxiety feels like. You are starting with a spirit that knows the difference between being wanted in moments and being loved with consistency. You are starting with a heart that has learned what happens when tenderness has no boundary. You are starting with scars. Yes, but scars are not emptiness. They are places where truth entered and left a mark. You are not the same woman, and that may make you grieve, but it may also save you. Because the woman you are becoming will not be as easily convinced by words that do not become actions. She will not ignore her body as quickly. She will not keep translating silence into hope. She will not call anxiety chemistry. She will not call inconsistency passion. She will not call overgiving devotion. She will not call self-erasure love. Not because she is bitter, because she has paid too much to remain unconscious. Pause. So let yourself grieve the woman who believed. But do not bury the woman who is learning. She is here now. Quietly, maybe still tired, maybe still uncertain, maybe still crying at unexpected times. But she is here, and she is beginning to understand that treating herself kindly means no longer making pain the proof of love. She is beginning to understand that the heart can be loyal to a memory and still choose a different future. She is beginning to understand that love is not supposed to require constant self-negotiation. She is beginning to understand that the dream she lost was not the only dream she is allowed to have. That last truth may feel far away. Let it be far away. You do not have to believe it loudly today. Just let it sit near you. The dream you lost was not the only dream you are allowed to have. Pausa. There will be a time when your life begins to feel like yours again. At first, it may come in small flashes. A morning when you do not check. A laugh that surprises you. A meal you enjoy. A room that feels peaceful. A song that does not break you. A walk where you notice the sky more than the absence. A moment where you realize you have gone several hours without replaying the story. Do not dismiss those moments. They are not small. They are evidence that your inner life is slowly returning to you. After deep grief, joy often comes back shyly. It does not burst through the door. It knocks lightly. It asks, "May I come in?" Let it. Even if sorrow is still there. Joy does not disrespect grief by visiting. Peace does not mean you never loved. A lighter day does not erase the depth of what happened. Sometimes women feel guilty when they begin to feel better, as if healing means betraying the relationship, the memory, or the woman who suffered. But you do not owe the past your permanent sorrow. You can honor what happened without remaining emotionally buried in it. You can remember and still live. You can grieve and still laugh. You can love what was good and still leave what was harmful. You can carry the lesson without carrying the wound open in your hands. Soft pause. Maybe today, treating yourself kindly means allowing grief to have a place, but not the whole house. Give it a chair. Give it honesty. Give it tears when they come. Give it a journal page. Give it a quiet prayer. Give it a walk. Give it a trusted conversation. But do not give it every room, every window, every morning, every future. You still live here too. Your hope lives here too. Your dignity lives here too. Your body, your laughter, your creativity, your appetite, your friendships, your gifts, your becoming, they live here too. The grief may be loud, but it is not the only voice in you. There is another voice, softer perhaps, but steady. It is the voice that says, come back. Come back to the body you neglected while carrying heartbreak. Come back to the dreams you paused while waiting for someone else to become sure. Come back to the friendships you withdrew from because shame made you quiet. Come back to the mornings that belong to you. Come back to the woman who still has life inside her. Come back, not because the grief is gone, but because you are still here. Pause. And maybe that is the sacred truth of this part. You are allowed to mourn what did not love you well. You are allowed to cry over what still had beauty. You are allowed to grieve the years without calling yourself a fool. You are allowed to miss the dream without returning to the damage. You are allowed to honor the love you gave without using it as a chain. You are allowed to say, that mattered, and also say, it cannot have me anymore. That is not contradiction. That is healing. Healing does not erase complexity. It gives you enough dignity to stop being ruled by it. Tonight, if grief comes, do not fight it like an enemy. Sit with it like a messenger. Ask what it is carrying. Maybe it is carrying love. Maybe it is carrying disappointment. Maybe it is carrying the younger version of you who wanted to be chosen. Maybe it is carrying fear that the future will not be beautiful again. Listen, but after you listen, remind grief that it is not the leader of your life. It is a visitor, a sacred one, perhaps a painful one, but still a visitor. You are the home, and you are allowed to decide what remains living inside you. Pause. So be kind to yourself in the grief. Do not rush it. Do not worship it. Do not use it to measure your worth. Let it move. Let it teach. Let it soften what must stay tender. Let it clarify what must never happen again. Let it wash the illusion from your eyes without washing the love out of your heart. Because you are not healing to become empty. You are healing to become whole. And wholeness means you can remember without returning. You can cry without collapsing. You can love without losing yourself. You can begin again without pretending the ending did not hurt. In the next part, we need to speak about the quiet return to self. How a woman begins rebuilding identity after being emotionally reduced, and how she learns to belong to herself again without becoming closed to life. There is a quiet return that happens after a woman has been emotionally reduced for too long. It does not always look like confidence at first. It may not look like glowing strength. It may not look like a bold declaration, a new life, a new wardrobe, a new morning routine, or a sudden feeling of freedom. Sometimes returning to yourself begins with a whisper so small you almost miss it. Hauser, a moment where you realize you do not want to explain anymore. A moment where your body says no before your mouth can make an excuse. A moment where you notice that the old story does not pull you as strongly as it did yesterday. A moment where you choose rest instead of emotional investigation. A moment where you hear yourself think, I do not want to live like that again. That sentence may arrive quietly, but it is powerful. Because a woman does not always return to herself in one heroic moment. Sometimes she returns in fragments. One boundary, one meal, one honest tear, one peaceful evening, one song that belongs only to her. One day where she does not betray her own knowing just to keep a connection alive. Soft pause. When you have loved someone who kept making you feel uncertain, your identity can become blurred. You begin to lose the edges of yourself. You may stop knowing what you want because so much of your attention is focused on what they feel. You may stop knowing what you need because you have spent too long negotiating with someone who treated your needs like pressure. You may stop recognizing your own preferences, your own rhythm, your own joy. You may become skilled at adjusting, skilled at waiting, skilled at reading the room, skilled at lowering your expectations before disappointment even arrives. And over time, you may not notice how far you have traveled away from yourself, not because you are weak, because emotional uncertainty consumes attention. It asks the mind to keep scanning. Is everything okay? Are they distant today? Did I say something wrong? Are they pulling away again? Should I speak? Should I stay quiet? Should I ask? Should I wait? Should I pretend I do not notice? And while you are busy watching the temperature of the relationship, your own inner life goes unattended. Pause it. This is one of the most painful losses after emotional inconsistency. You do not only lose trust in them, you lose intimacy with yourself. You stop asking, what do I feel? You ask, What will keep this from falling apart? You stop asking, what is true for me? You ask, what explanation will make this hurt less? You stop asking, what do I deserve? You ask, what can I tolerate? And a woman can tolerate so much that she forgets tolerance is not the same as love. Let that breathe. Tolerance is not the same as love. Endurance is not the same as devotion. Being able to survive something is not proof that you should keep surviving it. You were not created only to withstand pain. You were created to live, to breathe deeply, to feel safe in your own skin, to laugh without bracing, to speak without rehearsing, to rest without waiting for the next emotional interruption, to belong to yourself. Soft pause. Maybe belonging to yourself feels unfamiliar now. Maybe you spent so long belonging to the relationship, belonging to the hope, belonging to the waiting, belonging to the version of them you were trying to love, into consistency, that your own life now feels strange in your hands. This is normal. Do not shame yourself. When a woman has organized her emotional world around someone else's absence and return, peace can feel empty before it feels nourishing. Calm can feel boring before it feels safe. Freedom can feel lonely before it feels holy. And self-possession can feel selfish before it feels dignified. But keep going. You are not losing love. You are losing the habit of abandoning yourself for it. That habit may grieve. It may panic. It may whisper that if you stop reaching, everything is truly over. It may say, what if they forget me? It may say, what if they move on? It may say, what if I was the only one who cared? But ask yourself gently, if keeping their memory alive requires you to keep hurting yourself, what kind of love is that asking you to practice? A love that destroys the woman carrying it cannot be the love that saves her. Pause. The return to self begins when you stop treating your own life as a waiting room. Not a waiting room for their apology. Not a waiting room for their regret. Not a waiting room for their clarity. Not a waiting room for their emotional maturity. Not a waiting room for someone to finally say, I see what I had. Your life is not a hallway outside someone else's decision. Your life is not a chair beside a locked door. Your life is not something that begins only when another person becomes certain. You are already here, breathing, aching, yes, changed, yes. But here, and here is not nothing. Here is where you can begin placing your attention back where it belongs. On your body, on your peace, on your home, on your work, on your children, if you have them, on your friendships, on your creativity, on the small daily rituals that remind you that you are not only a woman who was hurt, you are also a woman with taste, memory, humor, intelligence, desire, wisdom, tenderness, and a future. Do not let heartbreak become the only name you answer to. Soft pause. Maybe today, treating yourself kindly means asking yourself questions that are not about them. What do I need this morning? What food would make me feel cared for? What corner of my room needs light? Who makes me feel peaceful after I speak to them? What do I miss about myself? What did I stop doing because sadness took too much space? What would I choose today if I did not have to organize my life around being chosen by them? That last question may feel tender. Let it be tender. Because many women do not realize how much of their identity became tied to being wanted by someone who stayed inconsistent. Their mood rose and fell with a message. Their confidence softened or collapsed with attention. Their sense of value became tangled in someone else's ability to choose. But your worth cannot be safely stored inside another person's inconsistency. It is too sacred for that. Your worth needs a steadier home, and that home must begin inside you. Pausa. Not in a shallow way, not in a slogan, not in pretending you never needed love. Of course you needed love. Of course you wanted to be chosen. Of course you wanted consistency. Of course you wanted tenderness you did not have to beg for. There is nothing shameful about wanting to be loved well. The wound was not that you needed love. The wound was that you began to believe their inability to give it defined your ability to receive it. It did not. A dry well does not prove you were not thirsty. It only proves you were standing in front of something that could not give water. And perhaps you stood there a long time. Perhaps you lowered the bucket again and again. Perhaps you blamed your hands. Perhaps you thought, maybe I am not drawing from it correctly. Perhaps you waited for water because once, long ago, you tasted a little. But one sip cannot become a river. And a woman cannot live forever at a dry well just because she remembers the day it gave her enough to hope. Soft pause. This is the kind of truth that returns you to yourself. Not because it makes the grief disappear, but because it stops making you the reason for someone else's emptiness. You were not too hard to love. You were asking for water where water was not reliably offered. You were not too needy. You were thirsty in a relationship that kept making care uncertain. You were not too emotional. You were responding to emotional conditions that kept your heart unsafe. You were not unworthy. You were attached to someone whose capacity could not match your depth. And when you finally see that, something inside you may unclench. Not all at once, but enough to breathe. Enough to stop begging the dry place to explain why it could not nourish you. Enough to begin walking toward your own life again. Pause. Returning to yourself also means remembering that your needs are not enemies. For a long time, you may have treated them like threats. You may have thought your need for consistency would push someone away. Your need for honesty would start an argument. Your need for reassurance would make you look weak. Your need for tenderness would make you seem demanding. Your need for clarity would make you seem controlling. So you kept them quiet. You folded them small. You wrapped them in careful language. You introduced them softly, apologetically, almost like guests you were embarrassed to bring into the room. But your needs are not shameful. They are signals. They are part of your design. A need for emotional safety is not a flaw. A need for respect is not excess. A need for truth is not drama. A need for consistency is not immaturity. A need to feel chosen is not weakness. You are allowed to need what helps love remain healthy. Pause. The problem was never that you had needs. The problem was that you were close to someone who made you feel guilty for having them. And now, as you return to yourself, you must learn not to continue their work inside your own mind. Do not shame yourself for wanting tenderness. Do not shame yourself for needing rest. Do not shame yourself for wanting someone who does not make affection feel like a reward you must earn. Do not shame yourself for wanting a love that can speak clearly, repair honestly, and stay present when life becomes difficult. These are not childish desires. These are grown desires. These are the desires of a woman who knows that life is already hard enough without having to beg for emotional steadiness in the one place that should help her breathe. Pause. Maybe you're afraid that if you honor your needs, you will ask for too much. But a need does not become too much simply because someone lacked the capacity to meet it. A coat is not too heavy because a weak hook falls from the wall. A truth is not too large because someone refuses to hold it. Your heart is not too demanding because it cannot survive on inconsistency. The right kind of love will not make you feel like your basic emotional needs are a burden. It may not be perfect. No love is, but it will not keep making you feel ashamed for wanting honesty, care, respect, and presence. Until then, you can begin practicing those things with yourself. Be honest with yourself. Care for yourself. Respect your limits. Be present with your own feelings. Keep small promises to yourself. Do not say, I am fine, when you are not fine. Do not say, it did not matter, when it mattered deeply. Do not say, I do not care, when what you mean is, I care, but I am learning not to hand my life back to what hurt me. That is self-trust. And self-trust grows when your inner words and outer actions begin living in the same house. Soft pause. For a long time, perhaps you lived divided. One part of you knew, another part hoped, one part of you was tired. Another part kept trying. One part of you wanted to leave. Another part was afraid of the emptiness. One part of you saw the pattern. Another part kept waiting for the person, the apology, the tenderness, the old version, the imagined future. This split is exhausting. It makes a woman feel like a stranger inside herself. But the return begins when these parts of you are no longer at war. You do not have to shame the part that hoped. You do not have to silence the part that still loves. You do not have to reject the part that is angry. You do not have to fear the part that is tired. You can gather them. You can say, I know why you hoped. I know why you stayed. I know why you are angry. I know why you are afraid. I know why you miss them. And I am here now. I will not let any one feeling drive the whole life. That is inner leadership, not control. Leadership. The healed self does not insult the wounded self. She leads her gently toward truth. Pause it. And maybe leadership today looks like choosing one thing that belongs to you. One thing that is not about the relationship. One thing that reminds you that your identity is wider than heartbreak. Maybe you write again. Maybe you cook something you used to love. Maybe you call a friend and tell the truth without apologizing for still being sad. Maybe you clean your space slowly, not to erase the past, but to make room for your own presence. Maybe you take a walk and do not use it to think about them. Maybe you let yourself be quiet without turning quiet into loneliness. Maybe you begin a small promise. For the next 10 minutes, I will not abandon myself. Not the whole day, not the whole future. 10 minutes, then another, then another. This is how a woman returns, not by forcing herself to become new overnight, but by choosing again and again not to leave herself behind. Soft pause. There is something deeply dignified about a woman who stops begging life to return her to who she was before the pain. At first, you may want that. You may want the old innocence, the old trust, the old softness untouched by disappointment, the old version of you who believed without evidence. But perhaps the goal is not to become who you were. Perhaps the goal is to become someone who can carry tenderness with wisdom, someone who can love without disappearing, someone who can hope without ignoring reality, someone who can forgive without removing the boundary, someone who can be compassionate without becoming a home for someone else's irresponsibility, someone who can say, I have been hurt without making hurt her entire identity. That woman is not less beautiful than the woman you were before. She is deeper. She has weather in her. She has truth in her. She has learned that peace is not boring. Clarity is not cruelty, and self-respect is not a betrayal of love. Pause. So today, treat yourself like someone returning from a long journey through emotional wilderness. Do not demand that she run. Let her sit. Let her drink. Let her speak. Let her cry if she needs to. Let her look around and remember what home feels like. And when she says, I do not know who I am anymore, do not panic. Say, then we will learn slowly. When she says, I feel behind, say, we are not measuring our life by the timeline pain interrupted. When she says, I am afraid I will never be loved well, say, we will not use fear to choose the next door. When she says, I miss them, say, I know. And we can miss them without abandoning ourselves. This is how you become safe for yourself. This is how the inner home is rebuilt, not with perfection, with presence. Pause, and one day you may notice that you are no longer asking, why wasn't I enough? You may begin asking, why did I ever believe I had to become less to be loved? You may no longer ask, will they come back? You may ask, what kind of life am I building now that I am no longer waiting? You may no longer ask, did they choose me? You may ask, am I choosing the woman I am responsible for? And that question will not be harsh. It will feel like sunlight on a place that has been cold for too long. Because the return to self is not a rejection of love. It is preparation for a love that does not require your disappearance. And even before that love arrives from anyone else, it is the beginning of a life where you no longer treat yourself as secondary. Tonight, perhaps you can do one small thing. Put your hand over your heart, not dramatically, just gently, and say, I am coming back. I may come back slowly. I may come back with tears. I may come back with questions. I may come back with pieces of myself I do not fully recognize yet. But I am coming back. And this time I will not leave myself just to be near someone who keeps leaving me. That is a sacred beginning. That is a woman standing at the doorway of her own life. And in the next part, we need to speak about love again, not rushing toward it, not fearing it, but understanding what kind of love your healed self will no longer abandon herself to receive. There is a tender fear that can come after a woman has been hurt deeply. It is not always the fear of being alone. Sometimes it is the fear of being touched by hope again. Pause, because hope once cost you so much. You hoped when the pattern had already begun speaking. You hoped when the apology sounded beautiful but changed nothing. You hoped when the silence returned. You hoped when your body was tired. You hoped when your friends may have been worried. You hoped when some quiet part of you already knew the relationship was asking you to disappear. And now, even the idea of loving again may feel dangerous. Not because you no longer have love inside you, but because you know now that love without truth can become a place where a woman loses herself slowly. So perhaps today, The kindest thing you can do is not force yourself to be open and not force yourself to be closed. Perhaps the kindest thing is to become honest about what kind of love your healed self can no longer afford to accept. Soft pause. You do not need to rush toward love to prove you are healed. And you do not need to reject love forever to prove you are wise. Healing is not the performance of being unbothered. Healing is not saying, I will never need anyone again. That may sound strong when the wound is fresh, but sometimes it is only fear wearing armor. You were made for connection. You were made for tenderness. You were made to be seen, heard, touched by kindness, met with honesty, and held in a love that does not require constant emotional survival. The betrayal did not make those desires shameful. The abandonment did not make your longing childish. The neglect did not make your need for care too much. What happened to you may have changed your discernment, but it does not have to destroy your capacity. A woman can become wiser without becoming unreachable. She can become protective without becoming hard. She can become slower without becoming bitter. She can say, I still believe in love, but I no longer believe every feeling deserves access to my life. Pausa. That is a different kind of openness. Not open like a door with no lock. Open like a garden with a gate. Alive, soft, fragrant with possibility, but protected because everything that wants entrance is not worthy of the soil. Everything that admires your flowers does not know how to care for roots. And after what you have survived, you are allowed to ask deeper questions before you let someone near the tender places again. Not suspicious questions meant to punish a new person for an old wound, but wise questions that honor the woman you have fought to recover. Questions like, can this person be consistent when they are uncomfortable? Can they tell the truth without making me pay for it? Can they hear my feelings without turning them into a trial? Can they repair after conflict? Can they respect a boundary without calling it rejection? Can they be present in ordinary days, not only intense moments? Can their affection become behavior? Can their words live inside their actions? Can I remain myself near them? That last question matters deeply. Can I remain myself near them? Because the right kind of love does not require you to keep editing your soul. Soft pause. Many women learn too late that chemistry is not the same as safety. Intensity is not the same as intimacy. A familiar wound can feel like a magnetic pull. An emotionally unavailable person can feel exciting when your nervous system has learned to confuse anxiety with passion. The chase can feel like purpose. The uncertainty can feel like depth. The high after distance can feel like romance. But your healed self will begin to ask a better question. Does this love make me peaceful after the excitement passes? Not bored. Not numb. Not untouched. Peaceful. Can I breathe here? Can I tell the truth here? Can I have needs here? Can I be imperfect here? Can I be tired here? Can I age here? Can I be human here? A grown woman does not need a love that only celebrates her when she is easy, beautiful, agreeable, cheerful, forgiving, and endlessly available. She needs a love that can meet her humanity without making her feel like a burden. Pause. Maybe, for years, you thought being loved meant being chosen by someone. But now you're learning that being chosen is not only about being wanted. It is about being honored. Being wanted may feel thrilling. Being honored feels safe. Being wanted may make the phone light up. Being honored makes the nervous system settle. Being wanted may bring someone back when they are lonely. Being honored keeps them accountable when closeness requires maturity. Being wanted may enjoy your softness. Being honored protects it. Being wanted may say, I miss you. Being honored asks, how did I make you feel? And how can I repair what I harmed? There is a difference. And once you see the difference, you cannot unsee it. That seeing may make you slower. Let it. Slowness is not fear when it is guided by wisdom. Slowness can be self-respect, learning to walk at the pace of truth. Soft pause. If someone new comes into your life one day, you do not have to hand them the full story of your wound as proof that you deserve care. You do not have to audition your pain. You do not have to explain every scar in order to justify every boundary. You can let trust grow through time, consistency, respect, and behavior. You can observe without paranoia. You can hope without surrendering your discernment. You can enjoy kindness without immediately building a future around it. You can receive attention without placing your worth inside it. This is important because after being emotionally starved, affection can feel like rescue. And a woman must be tender with herself when affection returns. She may want to believe quickly. She may want to rest in it. She may want to say, finally. But healing asks her to move gently. Not because everyone is unsafe, but because her heart is precious. Because access should be earned by character, not granted by chemistry. Because consistency over time tells the truth more clearly than intensity in the beginning. Because a person can speak beautifully and still not know how to stay. Pause. Do not punish yourself for being moved by tenderness. You are not foolish because kindness touches you. You are not weak because a gentle word still matters. You are not broken because being noticed still awakens something in you. After emotional neglect, even steady attention can feel almost overwhelming. Let yourself receive slowly. Let yourself notice. Let yourself enjoy without abandoning discernment. Say to yourself, I can appreciate this without rushing. I can be touched without becoming attached too quickly. I can listen to my body. I can let actions reveal what words begin. I can remain present with myself while getting to know someone else. That is the difference now. You do not have to leave yourself to love. You do not have to stop belonging to yourself in order to make room for another person. The right love will not ask you to disappear. Pause. And perhaps the most healing love, whether it arrives from another person or begins inside your own life, will feel less like a storm and more like shelter. Not perfect, not always easy, not free from conflict, but safe enough for truth, safe enough for repair, safe enough for silence that does not punish, safe enough for distance that does not abandon, safe enough for honesty that does not humiliate, safe enough for your nervous system to learn a new language. Because after betrayal, safe love may feel unfamiliar. It may not create the same rush. It may not make you ache and chase and decode. It may not keep you awake, wondering where you stand. It may feel quiet, steady, almost strange. And if you are used to chaos, steadiness may seem too simple at first. But do not confuse peace with lack of passion. Peace can be deep. Peace can be warm. Peace can be intimate. Peace can hold fire without burning the house down. Pause. A mature love does not need to make you anxious to prove it is meaningful. It does not need to disappear to make you grateful for its return. It does not need to wound you so reconciliation feels intense. It does not need to keep you guessing so you stay invested. A mature love may be simple in the places where pain made you expect complexity. It tells the truth. It follows through. It says, I am here, and then lives in a way that does not make those words feel empty. It does not make you beg for the basics. It does not turn every need into a negotiation. It does not treat your emotional safety like an inconvenience. And this is why the healed woman begins to recognize love differently. She no longer asks only, do I feel something? She asks, what does this feeling ask me to sacrifice? She no longer asks only, do they want me? She asks, do they value what access to me means? She no longer asks only, could this become love? She asks, can this become healthy? That question can save a woman years. Soft pause. Maybe this is difficult because part of you still fears that having standards will leave you alone. And loneliness can speak persuasively when the night is quiet. It can say, maybe you should accept less. It can say, maybe consistency is too much to expect. It can say, maybe every relationship hurts like this. It can say, maybe you are too old to wait for better. It can say, maybe this is all life has left. But loneliness is not always a prophet. Sometimes loneliness is just a wounded place asking for comfort. Do not let a lonely moment make a permanent decision about your value. You are allowed to desire companionship. You are allowed to want love. You are allowed to miss being held. You are allowed to wish someone safe would come close. But you are also allowed to say, I would rather be lonely in truth than partnered in self-abandonment. That is not cold. That is sacred clarity, because there is a loneliness that comes from being alone. And there is a deeper loneliness that comes from being with someone who makes you feel unseen. The first kind may ache. The second kind can erase you. 1,000. If you are alone right now, let this season be more than absence. Let it become return. Let it become the space where you learn your own rhythm again. The space where you remember what you like. The space where you rebuild trust with yourself. The space where your body stops bracing for someone else's inconsistency. The space where you no longer confuse silence with abandonment because your own presence becomes steady. The space where you begin to understand that companionship is beautiful, but it should not require self-loss. You are not waiting empty. You are recovering. You are not behind. You are becoming honest. You are not unwanted because one person could not choose you well. You are being invited painfully and tenderly to stop placing your worth in hands that could not hold it with reverence. Soft pause. There may come a day when you are ready to love again. Not because every fear is gone. Not because every scar has vanished. Not because you have forgotten, but because you have become safe enough within yourself to recognize what is safe outside yourself. You will not be perfect. You may still get nervous. You may still need reassurance. You may still have moments when old memories whisper, but you will have something you did not have before. A deeper loyalty to your own reality. A refusal to make confusion romantic. A tenderness that has learned to ask questions. A body you are willing to listen to. A soul that knows peace is not too much to ask. And when something feels wrong, You will not rush to silence yourself just to keep someone near. You will pause. You will breathe. You will listen. You will ask, is this love asking me to leave myself? And if the answer is yes, you will know what to do. Even if your hands tremble, even if your heart aches, even if the old longing begs, you will know that the kindest thing you can do is not repeat the wound just because it arrives in a familiar voice. Pause. But before any future love, there is the love you are practicing now. The love of not insulting yourself today. The love of feeding yourself today. The love of resting when you are tired. The love of believing your own experience. The love of refusing a conversation that always makes you feel small. The love of letting your grief speak without letting it drive. The love of keeping a promise to yourself. The love of saying, I do not have to earn gentleness. This love may not look romantic, but it is foundational. Because the way you return to yourself now will teach you what kind of love you can recognize later. If you keep abandoning yourself, abandonment will feel familiar. If you keep silencing yourself, silence will feel normal. If you keep minimizing your needs, neglect will feel acceptable. But if you begin treating yourself with respect, inconsistency will start to feel unnatural. If you begin listening to your body, anxiety will no longer be mistaken for attraction. If you begin honoring your peace, chaos will no longer feel like proof of passion. If you begin speaking kindly to yourself, cruelty will no longer sound like love. This is how your inner world becomes the first boundary. Pause. Maybe the kindest thing you can do today is to become the kind of presence you kept wishing they would be. Steady, honest, gentle, accountable, protected. Not perfectly, but sincerely. When you say you will rest, rest. When you say you will not check, do your best not to check. When you say you will stop rereading old pain, close the message. When you say you will eat, eat. When you say you will not shame yourself for crying, let the tears come without adding insult. Every small act of self-respect is a seed. You may not see the garden yet, but seeds know what they are doing underground. And you, too, are growing in places no one can see. Soft pause. One day, you may look back and realize you did not become cold. You became clear. You did not stop loving. You stopped confusing love with self-erasure. You did not lose your softness. You learned where to place it. You did not become less feminine, less tender, less open, less compassionate. You became more rooted, more awake, more loyal to the truth, more careful with your sacred places. And perhaps that is the quiet triumph after a season of being unchosen. You choose not to abandon the loving part of yourself. You protect her. You educate her. You let her rest. You teach her that she does not have to pour herself into every empty place just because she knows how to give. You teach her that not every thirsty person deserves access to her well. You teach her that love is not proven by depletion. You teach her that being kind to herself is not selfish. It is survival becoming wisdom. It is grief becoming a boundary. It is tenderness becoming home. Pause it. So if love comes again, let it find you living, not waiting by the window of the past, not starving at a dry well, not performing strength while secretly begging to be chosen. Let it find you with your own life in your hands. Let it find you with friends you trust, with mornings that belong to you, with boundaries that breathe, with a body you listen to, with a voice you no longer apologize for having, with a heart still soft enough to feel, but wise enough to notice when peace begins to leave. And until then, let your life be more than preparation for someone else. Let it be yours, fully, quietly, sacredly. Let there be beauty that does not need to be witnessed by the person who hurt you. Let there be joy that does not ask for permission. Let there be healing that does not wait for apology. Let there be tenderness that begins at your own table. Pause. Tonight, if you are afraid that you will never be loved, well, do not argue with the fear. Sit beside it. Tell it, I understand why you are afraid. I know what happened taught you to expect pain, but we are learning. We are learning what safety feels like. We are learning what consistency looks like. We are learning not to mistake longing for truth. We are learning that love should not require self-abandonment. We are learning that we can be open and protected at the same time. And perhaps for tonight, that is enough. Not a promise about who will come, not a fantasy about what will return. Just this: you are allowed to become a safe place for yourself before you become available to anyone else. You are allowed to take your time. You are allowed to let your standards rise from your healing, not your bitterness. You are allowed to love again one day without repeating the lesson. And most of all, you are allowed to treat yourself kindly right now before anyone else proves you deserve it. Because you do, not because they choose you, not because they regret losing you, not because someone finally sees it, but because you are a woman with a living soul, a tired body, a wounded heart, and a future that still deserves tenderness. In the next part, we will bring this journey home and speak directly to the woman who needs one small way to treat herself with kindness today, not someday, not when she is fully healed, but now. The kindest thing you can do today does not have to look impressive. It does not have to change your whole life by morning. It does not have to prove that you are healed. It does not have to convince anyone that you are strong. Pause. Maybe the kindest thing you can do today is much smaller than that. Maybe it is to stop speaking to yourself in the language of the person who hurt you. Maybe it is to stop calling your needs too much. Maybe it is to stop calling your grief weakness. Maybe it is to stop calling your longing foolish. Maybe it is to stop treating your own heart like an inconvenience simply because someone else did not know how to honor it. Because after betrayal, after silence, after emotional inconsistency, after loving someone who kept disappearing, a woman can become so used to being neglected that she continues the neglect inside herself. She ignores her hunger. She dismisses her tiredness. She rushes her tears. She insults her healing. She makes herself prove again and again that the wound was real. And today, perhaps the most sacred kindness is this: believe your own pain without making it your whole identity. Pause. You do not have to live forever inside what happened, but you also do not have to deny that it changed you. Both can be true. You can be wounded and still be wise. You can be tired and still be becoming. You can miss someone and still refuse to return. You can love what was beautiful and still tell the truth about what was harmful. You can grieve the years and still decide not to give the wound the rest of your life. That is not contradiction. That is maturity. That is a woman learning how to hold her own story without letting it swallow her. Soft pause. So today, do not ask yourself, why am I not over this yet? Ask instead, what part of me still needs care? What part of me still feels ashamed? What part of me still believes I should have known better? What part of me still waits for an apology? What part of me still wants to be chosen by someone who made choosing me feel uncertain? What part of me is still standing outside the old door, hoping it will open with a different answer? And when you find that part of you, do not drag her away. Do not shame her. Do not say, you are ridiculous. Do not say, we have already been through this. Kneel beside her gently. Tell her, I know you wanted it to be real. I know you wanted the years to mean something. I know you wanted the love to become steady. I know you kept hoping because hope felt less painful than truth. I know you stayed because leaving meant grieving not only the person, but the future you had already imagined. I know you are tired, and I will not punish you for surviving the only way you knew how. Pausa. This is how self-kindness begins. Not as softness without truth, but as truth without cruelty. Because cruelty may have already taken enough from you. Confusion took enough. Silence took enough. Being emotionally underfed took enough. Explaining yourself to someone who did not truly listen took enough. Waiting for consistency took enough. Wondering whether you were lovable took enough. Do not let the aftermath take your own tenderness too. Do not become another unsafe place for yourself. Let your inner life finally meet a voice that does not accuse it. A voice that says, you are allowed to heal slowly. You are allowed to need rest. You are allowed to feel angry without becoming bitter. You are allowed to miss them without returning. You are allowed to be disappointed without calling yourself foolish. You are allowed to begin again without pretending you were never broken open. Bowser, maybe today, kindness means choosing one honest act, not 10. 1. Maybe you drink water before you open the old messages. Maybe you eat before you analyze their behavior again. Maybe you take a shower and let the day touch your skin gently. Maybe you step outside and let the air remind you that life is still moving. Maybe you turn your phone over for 1 hour. Maybe you write the truth in a journal without softening it for anyone. Maybe you say, I was hurt, and stop there. No defense, no explanation, no apology for having a wound. Maybe you let yourself cry and do not call it falling apart. Maybe you stop checking whether they have changed and begin checking whether you are abandoning yourself again. That is a different kind of attention. And attention is powerful. Where you place your attention, you begin to rebuild your life. Soft pause. For so long, your attention may have lived outside you, on their mood, their silence, their absence, their return, their excuses, their small signs, their possible regret, their hidden feelings, their unread messages, their almost love. But now, your attention is being invited home, not because they no longer matter, but because you matter too. Your body matters. Your sleep matters. Your peace matters. Your future matters. Your softness matters. Your ability to trust yourself again matters. And the woman you are becoming needs your attention more than the person who already had so much of it and still did not know how to care for it. Pausa. There is a moment when a woman stops asking pain to explain her worth. She stops looking at someone's abandonment and asking, what was missing in me? She stops looking at someone's inconsistency and asking, how could I have become easier to love? She stops looking at someone's silence and asking, what does this say about my value? And slowly, with trembling honesty, she begins to say, their absence is information about the relationship. It is not a verdict on my soul. Their inability to choose me is not proof that I was lacking. Their carelessness does not erase the care I gave. Their silence does not get to become my identity. That is freedom beginning in the mind before it reaches the body. At first, you may only believe it for a few seconds. That is enough. A few seconds of truth can interrupt years of shame. And then you practice again and again until the truth stays a little longer, until your body begins to soften, until your breath no longer waits for someone else to give you permission to be at peace. Pause. Do not underestimate one kind thought toward yourself. A woman can rebuild from one kind thought. One kind thought can become one kinder decision. One kinder decision can become one protected evening. One protected evening can become one calmer morning. One calmer morning can become a life where anxiety is no longer mistaken for love. This is how healing often works. Quietly, repeatedly, without applause. No one may see the moment you do not reply. No one may clap when you do not check. No one may know that you chose rest instead of rumination. No one may understand how brave it was to sit with your feelings instead of running back to the person who once numbed them. But your soul knows. Your body knows. The woman inside you knows. And she is learning, perhaps for the first time in a long time, that you can be trusted to stay with her. Soft pause. That is the heart of treating yourself kindly. Staying with yourself. Not abandoning yourself when you feel embarrassed. Not abandoning yourself when you feel lonely. Not abandoning yourself when you miss someone you know was not safe. Not abandoning yourself when healing takes longer than you wanted. Not abandoning yourself when grief returns unexpectedly. Not abandoning yourself when you remember the good moments. Not abandoning yourself when you feel anger. Not abandoning yourself when you realize you still want an apology. Stay. Stay with the woman who has had to keep going while breaking quietly. Stay with the woman who smiled in public while grieving in private. Stay with the woman who gave too much because she thought love meant holding on. Stay with the woman who is now learning that love must include herself too. Pause. Maybe you are not ready to say, I am fully healed. You do not have to. Maybe you are not ready to say, I am grateful for what happened. You do not have to. Maybe you are not ready to forgive. You do not have to force what your soul cannot honestly give yet. Maybe you are not ready to stop missing them. You do not have to lie to yourself. Today, you only have to be truthful and gentle. Truthful enough to say, this harmed me. Gentle enough to say, and I will not harm myself for being harmed. That is the sentence. That is the beginning. I will not harm myself for being harmed. Pause. Let that reach the places in you that have been punishing themselves. The place that says, I should have left sooner. The place that says, I should have known. The place that says, I wasted my years. The place that says, maybe I was not enough. The place that says, maybe no one will ever love me well. Speak to those places softly. Sigh, I hear you. But shame is not our home anymore. We can learn without hating ourselves. We can grieve without returning. We can be alone without being unworthy. We can be soft without being unsafe. We can become clear without becoming cruel. Pausa. And maybe tonight, before you sleep, you do one small thing that tells your nervous system a new story. You make the bed, not because life is perfect, but because your rest deserves dignity. You wash your face, not because tears are shameful, but because your skin deserves care. You close the old conversation, not because it meant nothing, but because reopening it keeps costing too much. You breathe slowly, not because breathing fixes everything, but because your body deserves a moment without war. You pray, not for them to come back, not for the past to rewrite itself, but for steadiness, for clarity, for mercy, for the courage to keep returning to yourself. Soft pause. And if the night feels lonely, do not treat loneliness like a command. Loneliness may knock. It may sit beside you. It may remind you of familiar arms, familiar words, familiar pain. Let it speak, but do not let it lead. Tell loneliness, I know you are here, but you do not get to choose my life tonight. I can feel you and still protect myself. I can ache and still not return. I can be alone and still be held by my own presence. That is not pretending. That is practice. And practice is how a woman becomes rooted again. Pause. One day, the kindness you practice now will become natural. You will no longer have to fight so hard not to blame yourself. You will no longer have to remind yourself every hour not to check. You will no longer have to explain to your own heart why inconsistency was not love. You will no longer feel guilty for needing peace. You will no longer mistake emotional hunger for devotion. You will no longer believe that being chosen by someone else is the only proof that you are worth choosing. You will choose yourself in quieter ways, without drama, without announcement, without needing anyone to see. You will choose yourself by staying honest, by keeping your boundaries, by honoring your body, by refusing to romanticize what repeatedly harmed you, by allowing joy to return without guilt, by letting love, real love, become something steady enough to meet you where you no longer abandon yourself. Pause. Until then, begin here, with today, with this breath, with this tired heart, with this body that has carried so much, with this woman who does not need another lecture, another accusation, another demand to heal faster. She needs kindness, not the kind that lies, the kind that tells the truth and still stays, the kind that says, yes, it hurt. Yes, you loved deeply. Yes, you lost something. Yes, you stayed longer than you now wish. Yes, you are still worthy. Yes, you can begin again. Yes, there is life after this. Not a perfect life, not a painless life, but a life that belongs to you again. Soft pause. So let this be your small promise. Today, I will not make myself earn gentleness. Today, I will not turn my grief into shame. Today, I will not use someone else's absence as proof against my worth. Today, I will not reopen a wound just to feel close to what hurt me. Today, I will not abandon the woman who is trying to come home. Today, I will treat myself as someone sacred enough to protect. And if tomorrow is hard, I will begin again. And if I cry, I will begin again. And if I miss them, I will begin again. And if I feel weak, I will begin again. And if healing feels slow, I will begin again. Because beginning again is not failure. It is devotion. Devotion to the life still inside you. Devotion to the woman you are still becoming. Devotion to the truth that your story did not end with the person who failed to love you well. Pause. You are still here. Not untouched. Not unchanged. Not unscarred. But here. And here is enough ground for mercy. Here is enough ground for dignity. Here is enough ground for one kind act, one honest breath, one protected night, one quiet return. So let today be the day you stop treating yourself like the wound was your fault. Let today be the day you stop calling your tenderness weakness. Let today be the day you stop asking the past for permission to live. Let today be the day you place your own heart back into your own care. Gently, firmly, with tears if they come, with trembling if it happens, with grace, even before you feel graceful. Because the kindest thing you can do today is not to become someone new. It is to stop abandoning the woman who survived and to tell her with the deepest honesty you have, I am here now. I believe you. I will care for you. I will not leave you again.